Hello everyone and welcome to our next live installment of $1 Million Magic here from Minneapolis, USA. It's time for the closing course of day 2. It's the Silver Showcase. 24 hours ago, 8 gaming greats from around the world came together to draft some of the most iconic, weird, crazy, fabulous, silly cards in Magic's 25 years of storied history. Now, with their decks built, it's time for the quarterfinals. Maria, how does the schedule play out?
Okay, so yesterday was our Rochester draft. We got to watch every pick from every pack. Very awesome. Today, the quarterfinals. Tomorrow, it'll be the semifinals. And then the finals will happen on Sunday morning before the top 8 of the Pro Tour. So that's how that's going to work.
Right. Now, today and tomorrow, it's best 2 games out of 3.
Yes.
But Sunday's a bit different.
Yeah, they're going to play 5, best out of 5 there. So
okay,
just beware of that. And here's a look at our bracket. Let's take a look at who's going to be playing who here in our quarterfinals. Jason Chan, aka Amaz, is going to be playing David Williams. Paulo, Vitor, Damo, Rosa versus Brian Kibler. John Finkel versus Rafael Levy. And Stanislav Cifka versus Shuhei Nakamura.
Right, so the way this is going to work, we're going to play 2 quarterfinals at once. We'll bounce back and forth between them, and we're going to start in the top half of our bracket. So our first 2 quarterfinals will play together. So why don't we start by looking at Jason Chan. This is Amaz. He began playing Magic with the release of Magic Origins. He's 27 years old from Hong Kong, closing in on 1 million followers on Twitch, which is just crazy. And he prefers drafting. Well, of course, you don't need to finish that sentence because we all prefer drafting. That's all you need to know. That's Amaz. Now, we're going to show you the deck 2 ways here. You may find one or the other easier to understand. You may find both of them impossible to understand, because that's part of the fun here at the Silver Showcase. So, it's black-green with a little bit of red. You see a couple of Erg Raiders there. There's a Fireball, the Berserk. We're going to talk with Simon in just a little bit about his deck in more detail. But first, why don't we hear from Amaz?
I'm here with Jason Chan, better known to most people as Amaz. Jason, what role does Magic play for you in your gaming career?
Oh, that's a good one, because when I first started Hearthstone, all my Hearthstone players, they know Magic, right? Because they started Magic and then Hearthstone. I'm kind of the other way around. And they will always talk about like these cool Magic cards and like, Magic strategy and whatnot, and I would just sit there being kind of like a dummy. So Magic for me is kind of like, I want to beat my friends, and it's kind of like a hobby. And then, I gradually mixed into like more competitive play, more sort of limited. Went to a lot of GPs and limited, and then now I'm playing standard. So it's gonna be a rough one, but I practice a lot. So yeah.
Now I know I've definitely played against you online, and the Amaz, the gamer handle being so much more well known than your real name.
Oh yeah.
Can be. You actually did really well last weekend at the Grand Prix here in Minneapolis.
Oh, I'm definitely more comfortable in limited. I was 1 round away from top 8, and yeah, just really like limited. Drafting in Magic is something that no other game really offers, so I'm like really attuned to it. And I'm gonna be doing a beta draft, but then I couldn't really practice that because Magic Online doesn't have that obviously, and it's really hard to find real life cards. So I did some generators online. And hopefully I'll do well, All
right, Jason, good luck this weekend here at the Silver Showcase.
So we said we'd show you the decks 2 ways. You've seen the pictures, the pretty pictures from 23, 24, 25 years ago. How about just a straight list and give us a sense of how many creatures he's running and the colors and so on. And we've got these by casting cost. So up at the top left, you've got your Black Knight and your Erg Raiders and your Fire Sprites costing 2, Wily Wolf, and then coming down to the bottom, Shivan Dragon.
All right, let's first talk about the thing that jumps out at me the most here, Simon. He's playing 3 colors, and Shivan Dragon, you need 2 red there.
That's what I was going to say. He's even playing a Mishra's Factory. That looks quite a bit greedy to me. I know that games will go longer in such a slow format, old format, but don't forget that Fire Sprites can generate a red mana. I still think it's on the greedy side. Pestilence, Shivan Dragon, and a bunch of double green cards.
Bold.
Bold.
Bold choice, bold choice. Let's go with that. All right, his opponent is David Williams. There you see him, the former poker player, now retired from the game to be a full-time dad to Liliana. Good choice. Avid cook, runner-up in Season 7 of MasterChef. Tremendous poker player, one of the best teammates in Magic history. Let's take a first look at his deck for you in graphic form. He is red-white, pretty clean. Lots of red and white spells there. Also, look out for Artifact Millstone. We'll talk more about that in a moment. So let's cut then to his actual list in terms of just words on the screen. Away we go.
All right, so he's got some pretty powerful, iconic cards. Sarah Angel and Millstone, they kind of seem to be a little different. What do you make of this deck, Simon?
I actually have to say I love this deck, but it's not because of the pure power level. It's really because you can see that he came in with a plan.
Sure.
He has a bunch of walls. He has 3 win conditions, or actually 4. Sarah Angel, Personal Incarnation, but if the creatures are being dealt with, there's still Fireball and the Millstone to win the game. Also, main deck Circle of Protection green. David knows he's playing against Amaz.
That's smart.
Yeah, and so we should say they knew yesterday, of course, who they were going to play as they drafted. And a lot of these players, we're going to see this as a recurring theme, have set up their decks with cards that may not be good tomorrow in the semis, but are great today in the quarters.
If you can main deck a single card that basically negates half of your opponent's deck, you're going to do it.
Okay, quarterfinal 2 sees this man, Paulo Vitor Damo de Rosa, the Hall of Famer. He is, as you can see, one of the record holder for most prize money won in Magic history, Hall of Famer from 2012. Let's take a first look at his deck in graphic form for you. So we'll show you all the delights that Paulo is running. There we are. Lots of black, lots of blue, pretty clean cut again. I hope that Hasban Ogress is very good because there's a lot of them. 2 Graders, 2 Prodigal Sorcerer. Now, no, that's good. Why don't we take a look at the actual list in text form? Simon.
Yeah, PV is one of the best drafters in the world. He won a Pro Tour with a top 8 draft. I like the utility of his deck. Old Man of the Sea, 2 Prodigal Sorcerers, a Sorceress Queen, and Rod of Ruin. These reusable effects and a great curve make this look almost like a modern draft deck, as opposed to these other decks, which are like 3 colors all over the place. If that's actually going to be good, we will have to see, because it's not like you can just use modern drafting standards and apply them to a completely different format.
And he's got creatures kind of on the lower end of his curve, too, which aren't, completely worthless.
No, and this is going to be kind of the deciding factor. If your 2-drops, or even 1-drops in the case of Curd Ape, are 2/3s, and other people are paying 4 mana for their 2/3s, you're definitely making a bargain.
Right, and also a card like Will of the Wisp, if he finds himself on the defensive, that is going to sit there for a long time, just getting in the way, and so are those walls.
Walls, I think, are going to be huge. The fact that you can regenerate some of your creatures or just pump them, and over time, your creatures that might have been late picks in the draft become so much more powerful.
So, Maria, who is Paulo paired up against?
Oh, well, it's none other than Brian Kibler, the Dragon Master himself. 5 Pro Tour top 8s with 2 wins, inducted into the Pro Tour Hall of Fame in 2010. Of course, now he is a Hearthstone Championship Tour commentator. I love this fun fact. Commissioned artist Steve Argyle to immortalize himself, his wife Natalie, and their dog Shiro, who's very cute, in a painting that was used as art for a playmat present given to guests at their wedding. So,
yeah, good. He wins. Well done.
Pretty cool stuff there.
Very, very good. All right, let's take a look at his deck. There it is in graphic form. Well, there's lots of forests, there's lots of islands, and there's a few mountains. Not for a fireball, but similarly burning effects in Lightning Bolt and Pyrotechnics. We'll look at the text in a little bit, but first, why don't we hear from the Dragon Master himself?
I'm here with Magic the Gathering Pro Tour Hall of Famer Brian Kibler. Brian, you've been playing on the Pro Tour for as long as the Pro Tour's existed, but when you look back at this core set of Magic, the beta packs, as a game designer, what has allowed this game to endure for 25 years?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think that the ideas that Richard Garfield instilled in Magic, starting with Alpha and Beta, were just so amazing. The color pie, the number of puzzles that you can solve building decks. That's really what kept me in Magic for so long, and kept me coming back even when I took breaks or quit and thought I quit. No one really quits. No one hangs up the wand forever, as it were. But you just have this constantly evolving, constantly changing intellectual challenge that you are trying to figure out what the best way to use all the different cards that are legal at every time. And now there's new cards. You have to figure those out as well. So it's just something that will always be with you as a mental challenge your entire life.
And is the challenge for this event unlearning 24 years of Magic history and getting back to that first year of the game?
I mean, the challenge for me was reading the Oracle text on a lot of these cards because they don't do what they say in a lot of cases.
All right, well, good luck this weekend, Brian Kibler.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's take a look at Brian Kibler's deck list in list form, get a better idea of what he is playing in this tournament, and there you see it right before you. A lot of actually iconic cards from the game in this list, Simon. Grizzly Bears, Giant Spider, Lightning Bolt.
I think that most of the power level is actually contained in the spells. The creatures look pretty vanilla to me. On the other hand, Kibler definitely knows what he's doing when it comes to these wacky formats. As a game designer himself, he just has a good feel for what is possible and what he can exploit. The big question here is going to be, how is his matchup against this blue-black deck? Is it going to be the green creature stopping the blue-black onslaught? Is it the pyrotechnics just taking out PV's board? Or is the efficiency of the blue-black deck a little bit too much to handle?
Well, it's time for the first set of quarterfinals here. Will it be Amaz from Hearthstone? Will it be Dave Williams from Poker? Will it be Paulo, Vitor, Damo, Rosa, or Brian Kibler in a rerun of a Pro Tour final that went the full 5 games in 2012? Let's head down for our quarterfinals here from the Silver Showcase.
Hello and welcome to this, the first set of quarterfinals from our Silver Showcase. I'm Tim Willoughby, this is Paul Cheon, and we're going to get a chance to see, well, Magic the original way that it was played.
Excited.
Back
So
in
excited
1993, 1994, there were just a few sets to play with, and in some respects, these decks that these guys have got, it's almost as if we're 25 years ago, they're a bunch of friends, they've cracked a bunch of packs, they've each built decks, and they're going to battle them against one another. But this time round, there is a lot on the line.
Absolutely. This is, one of the bigger prize pools, especially for just kind of an individual 8-man event. This is huge. And, for a lot of these players, they were participating in, of course, the Pro Tour. But I think a lot of time was also spent prepping for this event because, first place prize, $35,000.
It's a very big deal. I know there's a lot of excitement in the room for these players. They're just trying to figure out a way of taking cards from 25 years ago and making them work in 2018. Let's head down to our feature match area for our first quarterfinals. Hello and welcome to this, our first set of quarterfinals for the Silver Showcase. The format, unlike any other, we've got Beta, we've got Antiquities, we've got Legends, we've got Arabian Nights, all in one draft format, and we've got 8 huge names in gaming, some of the biggest players in the history of Magic the Gathering, all fighting to become the victor here in the 25th anniversary of Magic's Silver Showcase. Let's see who we've got in our first quarterfinal match here. So first up, there we see it, Hall of Famer, one of the most successful players in the history of the game, Paulo, Vitor, Damo, Rosa, big smile on his face, and he is up against Brian Kibler in what is a rematch from a Pro Tour final.
Right. And look at this. Look at the excitement on their faces. These players have already played 7 rounds of Magic today, but this might be, one of the highlights of their day. And I was basically looking forward to this all day. And taking a look at these decks, we've got Brian Kibler on basically a teamer deck, a blue-green base deck, and you're going to see this a lot, by the way, in a lot of the different people's lists. A blue-green deck splashing red for very powerful burn spells. We just took a look at Kibler's deck earlier. He's got Lightning Bolt and Pyrotechnics. He's going to need to use them very wisely because he was talking about how, in this matchup, of course, this was a Rochester draft. He knew all the cards that Paulo had in his deck. He knew that Prodigal Sorcerer was going to be a huge problem. And he's like, I needed to take some red removal to be able to deal with those Prodigal Sorcerers.
So things kicking off here, and we've got a lot of OG cards in this matchup. We got the original Grizzly Bears there, trading off with a Hasban Ogress. The 2-2 on turn 2, that's a very efficient card, but this is a gigantic one early in this matchup.
Oh, this is huge.
There is Life Force. Now, this is a card that, by and large, does not do very much against very many things, but green to counter a black spell.
Yeah.
And with 3 forests in play, that means that Brian Kibler can shut down one whole color in Paulo Vitor Damo de Rosa's deck here. Paulo, though, with that Prodigal Sorcerer in play, may be able to get some work done.
Right. Now, keep in mind, Life Force typically in Limited is a card that you would put in your sideboard. It's a very effective sideboard card. However, again, this was Rochester Draft. Everybody knows the contents of their opponent's decks. So when you do that, and when so much is on the line, it is actually a good play to make sure you main deck cards that are actively good against your opponent, despite maybe not being so good in rounds 2 and rounds 3 of this tournament. So main deck Life Force out of Brian Kibler to deal with many of Paulo Vitor's black cards. Now on the flip side, Paulo also main decking Death Grip as a way to counter Brian Kibler's green creature. So
yeah,
it's
both of these players...
Classic matchup of life and death here going on.
Yeah, they're super experienced in this Rochester draft format where you get to see what your opponent's drafting, and they've both used that to the absolute hilt to try and give as much game in this specific quarterfinal as they possibly can. Right. It may be that in our semifinals, whoever makes it through has a card in their main deck that's not quite as powerful, but they've got to get there. And so this is exactly what they're trying to do. And we can see the power of the Life Force that's in play for Kibler here. There's tons of black cards, in Paulo Vitor.
Paulo has 3 black spells in his hand, and currently Kibler is winning the race. He's got a Giant Spider up against a Prodigal Sorcerer. So, he's just keeping up that mana for the Life Force, and it's going to be really, really hard for, Paulo's going to need to try to bait, a counter effect with one of his black spells if he wants to resolve something else, because again, currently Brian Kibler up in the race, Giant Spider, a little bigger than that Prodigal Sorcerer. Yeah, and there's actually a lot of problems here for Paulo Vitor Damo de Rosa in what Kibler can have going on. Sea Serpent is a gigantic monster, but it can only attack if your opponent's got an island. Ooh, and an Ironroot Tree Folk. This Prodigal Sorcerer good against little things, but not good against giant monsters made out of wood. Yeah, all of the creatures in Brian Kibler's deck, once he starts going up to this higher end of the curve, have a gigantic toughness, and that will not be something that Prodigal Sorcerer on its own can do much about. As things stand, you see there Kibler waiting until he had 7 mana before he cast the Ironroot Tree Folk. He's still got green up so he can counter the first black spell from his opponent. That means that the Death Grip that's just been drawn by Paulo Vitor Damo de Rosa it's a risky one to even cast. Right. It's the first person to kind of resolve their color hosing card, if you will, is coming out ahead here. So now Paulo's playing this out, trying to see if Brian Kibler will use the counter magic here, or is he going to let it resolve? And does he feel comfortable enough just having an Ironroot Tree Folk and a Giant Spider to try and seal the deal here? Yeah, I mean, I guess he's already got his threats on the board. Maybe he says, I'll let you have that and counter the actual thing that's going to stop me from winning this game. And if you look at Brian Kibler's hand, it's all blue spells. Okay. He does counter the Death Grip. There's now a window open for Paulo Vitor Damo de Rosa to resolve a black spell. What's he going to go with? This is going to need to be very, very big because Brian Kibler's got a pretty nice army set up here. Frozen Shade, that's very big with the amount of black mana going on. This is a 0/1 creature, but you can spend a black mana to pump its power and toughness by 1 as many times as you want in a turn. As much mana as you have, you can use it all. And there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 swamps in play. So that means that this Frozen Shade, it could potentially be the biggest creature on this battlefield. Yeah. So the issue, though, is the fact that the Shade does start at a 0/1. So if Paulo wants to actually be able to use the Frozen Shade to keep the Ironroot Tree Folk at bay, he's going to need to pass with a ton of mana up. This leaves, this gives Brian Kibler the opportunity to just continue to deploy threats and eventually overwhelm the Shade. So both these creatures, they continue to rumble in here. Right now, the shield's kind of down for Paulo. He's just got black available, so he's not too able to make this Frozen Shade scary just now. Ironroot Tree Folk, ultimately, the one attacker. Right. The life total's tumbling on both sides here, and Kibler, he's got so much mana. Oh, this thing's huge! It's a Sea Serpent. Sea Serpent, again, because Brian Kibler knew that Paulo Vitor Damo de Rosa was playing a blue-black deck. Sea Serpent, again, typically a card you don't play in your main deck, but it's got Island Home. But Paulo's playing blue, so this is effectively a 6-mana 5/5 creature. And in a format like this where creatures aren't as good as they are in the current metagame, this is actually very, very good. Yeah, it's just a gigantic creature. Normally, Island Home, the way it works, you need to have an island in play or else you have to sacrifice your creature. And then on top of that, you need your opponent to have an island in play before you can start attacking. Right. Often, that's a terrible deal. Right now, though, this creature dominating this board. Yeah. And now Brian Kibler just has that that key card. He's got that life force in play, which is really slowing down Paulo. And Paulo's creatures just aren't big. Brian Kibler just has, if you take a look at his deck, he's got a bunch of Moss Monsters, Iron Root Tree Folks, and even an Opsianus Golem in his deck.
So here's a Paralyze coming down for that Sea Serpent, but in principle, Brian Kibler could counter this if he wanted with Life Force. He's just got to think whether or not he cares about what could come next from his opponent.
Right, and keep in mind, Paralyze acts as kind of a pseudo removal spell, but Brian can actually just use mana to untap the Sea Serpent if he really wants to get it.
Yeah, in upkeep here, he can pay 4 mana to untap that Sea Serpent. I'd imagine he might want to do that.
Right.
A nice combo in principle that Paulo could do if he really got flooded. He could paralyze his own Prodigal Sorcerer and then tap it, untap it, tap it again, get a little bit of extra damage in. Right now, though, he's just facing down such gigantic monsters. That's not really an option.
Wow, and that's a clone in Brian Kibler's hand. He can use that clone to copy that Sea Serpent to get another 5/5 on the battlefield, but he probably wants to wait a turn so that he could still keep up that life force to deal with whatever threat Paulo might play. Now again, look at Paulo. He played the Paralyze, but he didn't play any other spells because he needed to keep up all that black mana to keep Brian Kibler's giant green creatures at bay. So Paulo has to be really careful with how he taps his mana, because at any point, if he doesn't have enough mana to be able to block that Iron Root Tree Folk, he's going to be in a lot of trouble.
We got a brief shot in the background there. It looks like Jason Chan and Dave Williams already going to their sideboard. It might be we get an update on how that game went between our rounds. One thing worth noting, though, Paulo Vitor Damo Rosa, we're so deep in this game, he's still not found a second island. He's got Old Man of the Sea, a very powerful card, Water Elemental, a very large creature, both just stuck in his hand here. Not only has Brian Kibler had the run of the green in terms of playing out creatures, his mana is also looking fantastic.
By the way, we haven't mentioned this yet, and I think we made a huge mistake. Both players playing with all beta lands.
I mean, they're largely playing with all beta spells as well, it must be said. These lands, highly coveted, even just in and of themselves for people that are playing in the modern era. Beautiful looking cards here. And these decks, they're a piece of history that each of these players are holding. And you know what? After this event, these decks will be up for auction for the charity Child's Play. If you want a piece of history, you should get in on that one.
Right.
So here comes an Urg Raiders from Paulo Vitor Damo Rosa. It's a 2/3 for 2, which is a fantastic raid, especially for this era. It has to attack each and every turn, though. If it doesn't attack, it ends up dealing 2 damage to its controller. And right now, attacking with a 2/3 doesn't seem too exciting. This is essentially a speed bump from Paulo.
And Brian Kibler does let it resolve despite having access to that life force here. So this is a turn where Brian can actually choose to attack. That Shade is currently a 0/1, and he has Paulo has the ability to turn it into a 2/3, and he has a ping activation from the Prodigal Sorcerer. So that's only 3 damage. However, he can use the Urg Raiders to block this turn. So he could potentially go for a double block here with the Urg Raiders and the Shade, and combine that with the Prodigal Sorcerer. That is 5 damage, which would be able to take down either the Serpent or the Iron Root Tree Folk.
At the moment, the mountains in play for Kibler have just been used for colorless mana, but it looks like the same true again here as Clone does come down.
I imagine it's going to be another Serpent. 4 mana 5/5, pretty good deal.
Kibler, well known in the history of Magic the Gathering for loving to cast big green creatures. And yes, the Sea Serpent happens to be a blue creature, but the size of it's certainly something that I think that Brian Kibler will appreciate.
Absolutely. All right, and now Kibler has access to 4 green mana. So now Paulo can't even bait a black spell to to try to resolve a more important black spell, because now Brian Kibler has the ability to use Life Force multiple times and counter multiple black spells. And again, Paulo is playing 11 swamps in his deck. Most of his deck is black, and he's basically kind of splashing blue for a handful of cards.
Life Force, the kind of card that I would be surprised to see in any modern set. And this is part of the reason that it's really shutting down the game here. And you know what? That's kind of one of the hallmarks of these early sets. There are some very powerful, what we call color hoses, that just make it so difficult to get out from under that, well, death grip in the case of black. But in this case, beating the Life Force that Kibler has going on, very tough indeed.
Yeah. And Kibler now has Paulo down to 8. And Kibler does need to, maintain the aggression here, because Paulo does have access to 2 live Prodigal Sorcerers, which will slowly whittle down Brian Kibler's life total.
All right,
oh, here we go.
Gigantic swings from the Dragon Master here. Everyone's coming in, and with 8 life left, this is going to force some activity from Paulo Vitor Damo Rosa.
Yeah, Paulo has to block both of the serpents here if he actually wants to survive. He can use the shade and pump it up to have it survive and eat one of the serpents, but he is going to take 5 damage here. But he's going to lose one of the Prodigal Sorcerers here in the process.
Yeah, he's taking 5 on the swings from the Giant Spider and that Iron Root Tree Folk as well. This really tough situation for the pro from Brazil here. What's going to be on the top of his deck? Can he find a way? He's finally found that second island, but I think it may be too little too late here.
Yeah, and one very important thing about putting Paulo Vitor down to 3 life is that Paulo is actually Brian is actually splashing red for both Lightning Bolt and Pyrotechnics. Now, both of those cards are just cards that Brian can just draw to win the game on the spot.
Now, going into this matchup, Brian felt like he was going to have a tough time against Paulo Vitor Damo de Rosa. It has not played out that way in this game.
Well, you know, if you just draw your ridiculous color hoser, anything can happen, right? What if Paulo played his Death Grip on turn 2?
So now that there's the second island, there's a little bit of a pause for Paulo Vitor Damo de Rosa. There might be a way of him getting back in this game, but he's thinking pretty hard here about this one. Not an easy spot to be in.
Yeah, so if he plays the island, he can play the Water Elemental, which would be able to trade with the Serpent, or just eat the Iron Root Tree Folk, actually. Now, if he does choose to do that, he will only have 4 mana to pump up the Shade, which would turn it into a 4/5. But that still seems like pretty reasonable spot to be in, because then he can use the Shade here. And now Kibler has access to 3 attackers, but the Giant Spider, Paulo can potentially take the damage from that and just go down to 1. So, you know, this island was very, very timely.
I mean, I think it would have been timely any time in the last 4 or 5 turns, but yes, I agree.
Oh, sorry. He has access to 3 black mana, as the Water Elemental costs 5 mana, so the Shade can become a 3/4.
Paulo Vitor Damo de Rosa, one of the all-time most successful pros in the history of Magic the Gathering. He's up against Brian Kibler, also a 2-time Pro Tour winner. There you can see career winnings for Paulo, $471,000 and 12 Pro Tour top 8 in 58 appearances. Just a spectacular record from one of the youngest players ever to get inducted into the Hall of Fame.
And here is the Water Elemental. So, again, if Brian Kibler wants to be aggressive here and attack with everything, it's not going to be a super favorable trade, because the Water Elemental can eat the Iron Root Tree Folk, and then Paulo can opt to, you know, basically chump with the Prodigal Sorcerer, but trading a Prodigal Sorcerer for an Iron Root Tree Folk seems like a pretty good deal.
So Kibler here, he's got a Hornet Cobra and a Flash counter in hand, so he's got a way of countering a spell. He's also got another creature he can put on the battlefield, a 2/1 First Striker. 2/1, not a very exciting size in the face of a Prodigal Sorcerer, but big attacks here could force that Sorcerer to block and ultimately die.
Yeah, one of the nice things about making the aggressive attack here is that it's very likely that Paulo has to trade away that Prodigal Sorcerer. And if he does, then that gives Brian Kibler the opportunity to play that Hornet Cobra, which will no longer get pinged down by that Prodigal Sorcerer.
Nice little thing to see here. On Hornet Cobra, we've got an actual quote from the Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling. You don't see that too much these days on Magic cards, but a nice little thing that we used to have back in the old days.
Okay, so Paulo, you know, has got to be thrilled that Brian did not get in with the attack here. Now Paulo has the ability to play Old Man of the Sea, which can steal that Giant Spider.
Yeah, Old Man of the Sea, essentially, he jumps on creatures and gains control of them. So you tap him to gain control of a creature with power no greater than Old Man's power. They have a little struggle, and assuming the Old Man's strong enough, he can borrow one of your opponent's creatures, and he can hold on to it for, well, pretty much as long as he stays tapped.
All right, so Brian still has 2 burn spells in his deck that he can just draw for the win. Again, he has Lightning Bolt and Pyrotechnics. And Paulo currently still not really in a great position to attack yet. But Brian can't attack anymore. He doesn't have a good attack. That Shade has the ability to become a 5/6, which will just be the biggest creature on the board. And the Water Elemental, also being a 5/4, just trumps that Iron Root Tree Folk.
Yeah, Paulo Vitor Damo de Rosa just holding on by the absolute fingernails here in this game 1.
One at a time, one at a time.
Yeah, every turn we got that Prodigal Sorcerer doing a point, and while it's not a quick clock, it is a clock that's going to be difficult for Brian Kibler to deal with here. The question is, in 11 draw steps, can Kibler find a way of winning this game? He feels like he must be able to, surely.
Yeah, very, very likely. I mean, Paulo basically at this point is just shut off from casting any black spells. Basically, they're all blinks at this point. So Brian Kibler has plenty of time to still look for that Lightning Bolt, look for a Pyrotechnics, or even just additional copies of large green creatures.
Now, it's worth noting, while Paulo Vitor Damo de Rosa does have 2 islands up there, he did not draft a whole lot of counter magic, and this is something that Brian Kibler will know. He doesn't know the exact deck list of his opponent, but he was very much paying attention to what Paulo was drafting during the draft. That means that there's really no reason for Kibler to hold back if he happens to find that burn spell.
Right. Yeah, I think Shuhei Nakamura kind of cornered the market in all the counter magic. I think he's playing like the blue elemental blasts along with just mana drain counterspell. He basically got all the counter spells.
Yeah, actually, there's a little bit in Brian Kibler's deck. He's got a little bit of counter magic to work with, but right now that's not the most important factor here. And we can see Giant Spider, it's swinging in because it's not cost Paulo a card really to do so. And he really wants to get damage in, try and shorten that clock where he can so that he's not just going to be dead to a top deck burn spell.
Yeah, this is a really nice attack. So Brian Kibler, it looks like he has a free attack with the Iron Retrieve Folk, but Paul can now use a Prodigal Sorcerer to get that Giant Spider off the board, which then allows him to untap Old Man of the Sea and give Old Man of the Sea the window to steal additional creatures that Brian might play that has less that has 2 power or less.
It must be said, Brian Kibler, not generally an aficionado of smaller creatures. He's all about the really gigantic ones, but he's not going to mind too much if he gets a target here.
So Paulo can play 3 black spells this turn to try to resolve one of them. So Kibler is just going to fire off this counter magic, but he might be very careful about the second threat that Paulo resolves because it's pretty clear that Paulo wants to resolve that last card, whatever it is, in his hand.
So Hazard and Ogress, that gets countered. Now we have Will-O-the-Wisp. Will-O-the-Wisp, an interesting one. It's a 0/1 flyer that you can pay a black to regenerate. That means if it was going to take lethal damage, you can pay a black mana. It'll get tapped, but it will not get killed.
Yeah, it's really, really good against Kibler's green deck. But Kibler knows that that last card in Paulo's hand is likely a very, very strong black spell. Otherwise, he wouldn't have played out all these creatures. So he had basically no choice but to let that Will-O-the-Wisps resolve.
Yeah, at this point for Kibler, there are 2 cards in his deck that he really cares about. He needs to find himself one of his 2 burn spells. These Hornet Cobras languishing in his hand, a 2/1 first striker is just an awful pickup when your opponent has such an easy way to either steal it or indeed deal it 1 damage and kill it off.
Yeah, and this is why Paulo liked this matchup. And as he has multiple, he does have the Prodigal Sorcerers in play, and Brian Kibler has a decent amount of 1 toughness creatures. You know, he's got those Iron Retrieve Folk, but he's also got everything cheap that he has. Many of those creatures have 1 toughness.
Along comes a Moss Monster here. This is a card from Legends, of which there were quite a few in the draft. Another creature it's kind of all about the toughness, really. A 3/6 as opposed to the 3/5 of Iron Retrieve Folk. In a lot of matchups, this would be a gigantic problem, but right now, Vitor, Damo, Rosa, he's done a pretty good job of putting up shields here.
Right. Brian Kibler is going to need to draw multiple creatures to be able to get through what he has, but again, he's got 2 cards to just straight up win the game, and the Life Force is shutting off Paulo from any black spells that he can cast. Brian's just like, come on, just give me that Lightning Bolt. Give me a Lightning Bolt.
Okay, Sinbad's an interesting one. This is a card that lets Brian Kibler dig a little bit. He can look at the top card of his deck, draw it if it is a land.
Yeah, and keep in mind, you know, Brian Kibler is slowly getting whittled away by this Prodigal Sorcerer, but Kibler, if he feels that his life total is in danger, can start just littering the board with a bunch of those 1 toughness creatures to force Paulo to start pinging down all those other creatures.
I mean, I guess Sinbad here, given that what Brian desperately needs is spells, he probably couldn't afford to dare try Sinbad. Equally, 1 toughness, it could get shot down by this Prodigal Sorcerer.
This was a pretty nice draw from Paulo. This provides a little more of a clock. Unstable Mutation on a Will-O-the-Wisp means that's a 3/4 flyer with Regenerate.
Yeah, the Unstable Mutation, initially giving +3/+3, but then each turn from now on, that Will-O-the-Wisp will be getting a -1/-1 counter. It will be shrinking, but right now, I think it'll hang around for long enough.
Brian needs to just start deploying his threats here so that the Prodigal Sorcerer is targeted at the creatures and not his life total, because now the Will-O-the-Wisp is going to become a 2/3, so now Brian's going to go down to 2. Prodigal Sorcerer is going to get him down to 1. So I think this was that previous turn was the turn that Brian needed to just play out a bunch of creatures and hope that that was one of the ways to win. Here we go. But Kibler can just draw a burn spell.
It is not a burn spell. It's a clay statue. Another creature with Regenerate, which we covered on Will-O-the-Wisp. But not good enough to deal with what Vitor, Damo, Rosa had going on. Bit of a lucky escape there for the Brazilian pro after a very strong start from Brian Kibler. Ultimately, Vitor, Damo, Rosa picking it up. And you could see that he almost looked as surprised as anyone to be able to pick up that first game.
Yeah, that was quite close. You know, Brian Kibler had 1 window where he could maybe make a strange attack where he would lose some creatures, but he would force that Prodigal Sorcerer off the board, meaning that any 1 toughness creatures that he can draw, he can further deploy onto the board. But Paulo came back.
Just didn't work out. But do not worry, we have plenty more from our Silver Showcase. Do not go anywhere. More magic after these messages. Hello and welcome back to this first set of quarterfinals here from our Silver Showcase. We've just seen a spectacular game one between Paulo, Vitor, Damo, Rosa and Brian Kibler. But there was another match going on at the same time, and we're going to get a chance to find out how game one went from Marshall Sutcliffe down on the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So basically the first game started off with David Williams taking a look at his opening hand and getting a little misty-eyed. He looked at it and said, these are so beautiful. He just loved to play with the cards, and it actually got better for him from there. He led off with Land Tax, then a couple of Mesa Pegasus, then a Sarah Angel, and in true beta fashion, finished things off with a Fireball. So that was game one going to Dave Williams.
That is about as iconic as you get when it comes to cards from beta. Being able to get the Sarah Angel into play, that was one of the cards that once someone opened it, you just could not trade for it. And then a Fireball to finish, that is pretty much how everyone's looking to go in these beta drafts. The Fireballs do not get passed very often. But here we have our game two kicking off, and it's Chan on the play here, and he gets a Forest down. Now, Chan's deck, one of the notable things about it, its mana's a little bit shaky, so the Fire Sprites that he's played here on turn two could prove to be very important if he's going to get all of his mana sorted.
I think it's actually one of the most important cards in his deck. He has a bit of an ambitious splash here. He's got 2 mountains and a Shivan Dragon.
Well, he's just drawn that Shivan Dragon.
Right, and then he's got the Fire Sprites, which does give him, I guess, one additional source of red mana. And you know, he's got a Mishra's Factory, so he's kind of got a 3-color deck with a Mishra's Factory in here. I mean, if he gets to draw his mana in perfect sequence, he does have a very powerful deck. He's got lots of great cards in here. He's playing Pestilence, Fireball, Shivan Dragon, all kinds of goodies. But again, his mana base is very, very shaky.
Meanwhile, on the other side of things, David Williams, his deck is a lean, mean machine. He's got the early Mesa Pegasus. He's followed it up with a Thunder Spirit. He has 2 very powerful flying creatures here with which to just whittle down Jason Chan's life total early and often.
Yeah, and I had a time to talk to John Finkel about, you know, kind of the Shivan Dragon that Jason Chan took, because Jason Chan did have the ability to take a playable black card in his deck as he was just splashing red for Fireball, and John Finkel was, you know, a little like, if he could have just passed me the Shivan Dragon, because John Finkel was the next player in line, and he was very clearly in red.
Well, you know what? People have been hoping that other people let them have a Shivan Dragon for the entire history of Magic. There's nothing really changing there. War Elephant coming down there for David Williams. He's got a couple of creatures with banding here. On the other side of things, though, that looks like an Argothian Treefolk coming down for Jason Chan there.
Yeah, a giant creature on the ground. However, I mean, Dave Williams with an excellent curve here of just flyers, playing a Pegasus into a Spirit here. That's 3 in the air. And we talked about during the draft how important evasion is in this format. There's a lot of walls. You know, a lot of ways to muck up the ground, but not that many ways to kind of deal with flyers.
That is true. Also, it's worth noting that there's 2 different creatures on David Williams' side of the battlefield with banding. Now, banding is kind of a complicated ability. It means that your creatures can work together in fights against your opponent, either on attack or on defense. And the way it tends to work out when you have bans, especially on defense, is it makes attacking very difficult for your opponent.
Right, but David Williams going for the aggressive banding attack here.
Is that a banding attack, or is that 3 separate attackers?
I'm not sure, actually. The flyers can certainly get in. The War Elephant is currently a 2/2 trampler with the armor on it.
The armor giving +2 toughness, and he can spend additional white mana to pump that toughness still further.
Yeah.
It's got trample, so on its own, it's going to struggle to do too much trample damage here, but this is kind of a free attack for Williams.
Yep, and then he's got more flyers in hand.
There's a Cry Shield in hand as well there. I kind of like the look of that one. Another Mesa Pegasus here. You might recognize from Dominaria there was Mesa Unicorn, but Mesa Pegasus, the original. Cry Shield coming down, a way of giving creatures even more toughness. So on defense, David Williams looking pretty good. On attack, he's looking pretty good.
There it is!
There's enough
There
mana.
it is!
Here is the
He drew
Shivan
the
Dragon.
2 mountains!
When
He
you-
didn't even need the sprite!
Shivan Dragon, the last rare opened in the entirety of the draft. Jason Chan, very happy to pick it
And
up.
David Williams knows Jason Chan's list, and he's probably thinking to himself, what just happened? He just naturally cast the Shivan Dragon on turn 6 with 2 mountains in his deck.
Now, the interesting thing is here that normally Shivan Dragon, it's just super difficult to deal with. At least with banding, it's going to work out that David Williams is going to be able to block more easily. But I've just heard from Marshall, it may be that there's been some slight adjustments to Jason's list after sideboarding. He may have put a few additional mountains in his deck, just so that Shivan Dragon a little bit more reasonable to cast.
That makes a lot more sense.
Okay, big swings here coming from Williams. I guess that one way of dealing with Shivan Dragon is just racing it.
Right. Just banding. Banding will get it done. That elephant has a lot of toughness. David Williams has access to lots of white mana, so he can choose to redirect the damage that the Shivan Dragon deals to the elephant.
Yeah, there's also this Alabaster Potion, so you can use it to either prevent damage or gain life. And this is one of those things that really can mess with a race. Even if it works out that Jason Chan goes for a big block here, it may be that David can just keep his creatures alive.
Right.
Alternatively, he could just trap Jason into thinking that he's winning a race and then gain life at the last possible moment.
Absolutely. So Amaz here probably looking at a block here, as he's not gonna. He can't just choose to not block at all ever. But that elephant has trample, so he went for a block here. But David Williams can trample over.
Saved him a single point.
Single
This
point
is-
of damage.
This is also one less source of red mana to pump the fire breathing on Shivan Dragon. You can pay red mana to pump the power of that dragon. All right.
Wait, does he take
Should just take
two?
one trample. We'll just double check to make sure the life totals are all right there. Abu Jafar, this is kind of an interesting one that's come along. So a 1-mana 0/1 that if it's put into a graveyard from play during combat, you destroy, they can't be regenerated, all creatures blocking or blocked by Abu Jafar. Death touch, only Abu does not even have to touch anyone.
Right.
Summon Leper.
Now, this Shivan Dragon, I mean, are we looking at a race here? I mean, David Williams does have access to that Alabaster Potion. He's just been continuously attacking every single turn.
If it's a race, there's a fireball in Jason Chan's hand. That was the way that game one ended with Dave Williams firing off the big burn spell. This time round, though, Jason Chan, he's got access to a lot of damage here.
Right, now he can use that fireball to start trying to deal with a lot of these pesky flyers that are on the board. I don't think he's going to be using that fireball at David Williams anytime soon. He's probably going to look at, maybe dealing with a couple of those Pegasi that are on the battlefield. He can use fireball to split up the damage how he chooses. Currently, he can fireball 4/6
Well, here's the thing, though. If he chooses to split this fireball, paying for additional targets, he's got to be very careful how much damage he assigns, because Alabaster Potion could really mess with the maths on this fireball.
Right.
You're right, Jason. This is hard. This is a difficult set of decisions. I mean, resolving a fireball with multiple targets is already a little bit complicated. You pay X, and then you spend mana to split that X evenly. But one of these creatures could get kept alive here with Alabaster Potion, depending on exactly how Jason chooses to send his damage.
So
off.
David Williams with the Alabaster Potion can save one of his creatures, but Amaz will be able to get one of those flyers off the board. Likely he's going to use that fireball to target the two of the creatures that are on the battlefield. My guess is the Spirit and the Pegasus, but he could also opt to go for double Pegasus here.
Fireball, X equals 3, and then 2 extra targets.
Okay.
So he's trying to do 1/1 and 1.
Right. Okay, yeah, because there is that additional 1/1 creature on the battlefield. So now David Williams can use his Alabaster Potion to save one of the Pegasi if he wants.
And maybe he wants to keep Abu Jafar just so that he can use it to trade with the tree folk on the ground.
Yeah, definitely. And Chan, his hand is pretty loaded too. He's still got that Oubliette on the battlefield, which he will likely use on the following turn to deal with that elephant that's on the battlefield.
Oubliette, you can see it there. It's got a lot of text, but essentially when it comes into play, you get to exile a creature and until Oubliette leaves the battlefield. You stick it in that little prison cell in the ground.
Yeah.
Functionally kind of similar to something like a Journey to Nowhere.
Yeah, it is the kind of the black Journey to Nowhere Oblivion Ring type effect, but it only gets creatures. So Journey to Nowhere is the perfect comparison there.
Yeah, a couple of small cosmetic differences in terms of how it works. The creature, when it comes back tapped. A few other little bits and pieces, but functionally it's unlikely that Oubliette is going to get removed by David Williams. So it's just a 3-mana removal spell for a creature, which in this format, you're not going to say no to.
Yeah, and I mean this is going to be some huge swings. Jason Chan just starting to deploy his bombs. You got a Shivan Drag, you got a Fireball, you got an Oubliette.
All right, so one Mesa Pegasus is going to be kept alive in spite of the fireball that came from Jason Chan. And in some respects, it wouldn't surprise me if Dave Williams was happy that all that happened with the fireball was that it was able to kill 2 small creatures, because fireball is one of the most potent cards in this draft format.
Yeah. But Jason Chan, I mean, given that he has that Oubliette, I think he's going to be okay here.
Yeah, it's a really interesting situation he finds himself in. He does have the double black mana to be able to cast Oubliette.
Ooh, and we're off to the races. I like it. Aggressive attack from Jason Chan. It's like, you know what? I don't want to figure out this banding blocking thing. I'm just going to attack you, and let's just see what happens.
All right, so another land for Dave Williams. He's got that Cry Shield that he can potentially use to create a very potent blocker. In the meantime, though, Shivan Dragon just attacks for so much that I'm not sure that blocking is going to work out too well in terms of hoping to keep a creature alive. It might just be that his best bet is to carry on attacking here, try and draw the fireball of his own.
Yeah, and I think Jason has been able to turn it around. That was a huge fireball. Now, what can David even attack with? If David chooses to attack with 2 creatures, Jason Chan can then play an Oubliette on the elephant and attack for lethal.
Oh, big problems here for Dave Williams. We might be seeing this go to Game 3. Our quarterfinals, our semifinals, they are all going to be best of 3. But tune in on Sunday for our finals of the Silver Showcase. That'll be best of 5.
Quickly. He smells the blood. He's like, I'm going to do this. This is the win. He has 2 red mana to pump up the Shivan Dragon for 7 damage. Oubliette targeting the elephant, attacking for 10 in the air, and he wins!
Shivan Dragon is not in the business of losing games of the Magic the Gathering, especially not in this era. So that is a win. We're going to Game 3 in that one. But before we get a chance to do that, we're going to get to go to Game 2 in our first match, that being between Paulo Vitor, Damo Rosa, and Brian Kibler. These guys, they've finished their sideboarding. They are ready to go. And it's worth noting, because they saw how each other drafted, I wouldn't be surprised if there was not very much sideboarding between games 1 and 2 for these players.
They're already pre-boarded. Yeah. Oh, by the way, Tim, it turns out Fireball, pretty good card. Pretty good Magic card. Yeah.
It has been reprinted a few times, and every time it's been worth it, but not very often reprinted at Common, which is where it started out. We got Hazoran Ogress up against the Giant Tortoise. The Giant Tortoise, while it's untapped, is a 1/4. When it attacks, it becomes a 1/1.
Perfect foil for the Ogress, actually.
It certainly is. There's a Paralyze, though, and that would be enough to make space, though. If I'm Damo Rosa, I'm pretty tempted to get this Death Grip down early.
There is the opportunity to play Death Grip. At the same time, I'm also tempted to play Prodigal Sorcerer. that makes combat much more difficult because on the following turn, Paulo can opt to attack with the Hazran Ogress, and then even if Brian Kibler blocks with the turtle, he can use a sorcerer to finish off that turtle.
Yeah, there's a lot of different lines. I mean, you can paralyze and then ping with a Prodigal Sorcerer if you really wanted to. There's a ton of different options here for Paulo, who's got
no
a
third
good
land
draw.
for Brian Kibler.
Ever since the very beginning of Magic the Gathering, one of the ways to lose the game, not drawing the lands that you need. And for those of you who got a chance to watch the draft last night, or if you want to catch it up on our videos on demand, there were a bunch of beta packs that had lots of lands in, which might seem strange by today's standards, but back when you started playing, getting all of those lands was great. You need lands to play, and getting starter decks at the beginning of the game is pretty tricky to track them down.
And Paulo also now finds the 4th black source. He can play the Death Grip here and prevent Brian Kibler from playing any green spells.
Okay, so this is interesting. We see Paulo attacking in. He's not paying the 2, so this is a lot of damage going all over the place here.
Yeah, Paulo feeling very confident in the race here with those 2/3/2, with the pair of 3/2s on the battlefield, with that Death Grip and Paralyze in hand. He's just here to race.
Yeah, and while Kibler is hitting his land drops now, he's got a very awkward set of draws that means that he can't really cast a whole lot here.
Right. His hand is full of green spells, and that Death Grip is just shutting him out.
This is more like I was expecting game 1 to go.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is a rough old spot for Brian Kibler here. It looks like we might be seeing game 3s all over the place in our first set of quarterfinals. Vitor Damo Rosa's deck. Turns out it works a lot better when you don't have to face down a life force on turn 2.
Yeah.
Who knew?
So it looks like Paulo won the first game, so this would be the match if he wins this?
Of course it would, yes.
Right,
Sorry,
right.
My apologies. Vitor Damo Rosa could end up getting through here.
That first one, I mean, to be fair, it looked like he was behind the entire game and then just managed to stabilize with an unstable mutation to Will-O-the-Wisp.
All right, so Paralyze here on the Tortoise. And this time round, we do see the Hazran Ogress, at least one of them getting paid for Paulo.
Yeah, and at this point, you know, Brian just has a handful of green creatures. Not a lot he can do. Something like a Pyrotechnics might be able to get him out of it, but he doesn't have that in his hand, and he also needs land number 5.
Yeah, it's too much to hope for. He draws the Pyrotechnics. Argothian Pixies and a handshake there from Brian Kibler. The first man down in our Silver Showcase. And big smiles from Vitor Damo Rosa. He is our first semi-finalist. And we're going to get a chance to see some more of Dave Williams and Jason Chan. I know that Dave Williams, he posted his deck on Twitter. He was very pleased with it, and he has been going around the room getting as many extra opinions from as many players as he can. I saw him asking LSV, this is a weird format. Should I be on the draw in this format? There were all sorts of questions. He has been very carefully preparing for this. Meanwhile, he's not doing too badly in the Pro Tour either. With 1 round to go, I believe he's at X1. Not quite sure how he finished.
He finished 6-1. So they finished very well in the tournament, and you know, very, very happy with his deck. Yeah, but there's all kinds of little things in this format that people are trying. John Finkel, by the way, 41-card deck, right? So just everybody's doing all kinds of different things because people aren't exactly sure how this format plays out. This is entirely unique. I mean, there might have been some beta drafts or whatever in the past, but we've also incorporated 2 additional boosters to go along with those packs.
Yeah, and so while Jason Chan only learned to play Magic with Magic Origins, Dave Williams, he started playing when Unlimited was out. He didn't get too many games in 93, though he bought a few cards. He started properly playing in 94. And so he kind of said, you know what? This feels like home for me.
Yeah. Jason Chan with the 6 lands War Mammoth, but he had kind of like Forest, Mountain, Swamp, I believe. So he's like, well, I got all my mana, so maybe I should keep this, but don't think a 6-land hand with a War Mammoth is going to get it done.
Yeah, it's pretty tough when you're Jason Chan. You're playing against both Dave Williams, one of the greatest gamers in the history of gaming in some respects, and he's also battling against his own mana base.
Right. Like maybe the only 6-land hand, what am I keeping there? Maybe like 6 lands and a Fireball? That could be a reasonable thing to keep if you have all your mana?
I mean, potentially, yeah, you can play it early if you need to. You can save up for late if necessary also. There's a Fire Sprites in this 6, so I don't think you can be too sad about
look,
that.
That is a great hand. Jason Chen has a Hypnotic Spectre, so he just needs to find that second black source, and he does get this Scry. So if you can find a black source to play a turn 3 Hypnotic Spectre, that's going to be huge.
Yeah, the Mulligan rules a lot more forgiving in 2018 than they were in 1993.
Right.
Initially, the Mulligan rules didn't exist, and then you had a moment where you could only send your hand back and get a new one if you had all lands or no lands.
Oh, and this time, David Williams holding that Fireball. By the way, there are a lot of fireballs and a lot of disintegrates opened in this draft.
Okay, so Fire Sprite's coming along on turn 2 here for Jason Chan. If he finds a swamp, he will be in absolutely fantastic shape. I think he does have another swamp. That means turn 3 Hypnotic Spectre, one of the more potent things
and
you
he
can do in
finds a
Magic.
swamp. But Dave Williams does have that fireball, which I imagine he will happily fire off here to deal with this Hypnotic Spectre, as he does have lots of very powerful cards. Ooh! Never mind. He can hold on to that fireball as he just drew Wall of Swords.
Wall of Swords, a very, very powerful card, and one that Dave Williams was stunned to get as late as he did in the draft, because a 3/5 flying defender is just a complete roadblock for such a large proportion of this entire format.
It blocks everything, and it goes so well with all the banding creatures that he has. He actually sat there and had a tough pick between Wall of Swords and Giant Spider, because at some point in the draft, David Williams looked like he was going to be a white-green deck, but ultimately settled on a white-red deck.
Yeah, I mean, when I spoke to David today, he was very, very happy and actually said that the Wall of Swords, one of the cards that he really was particularly pleased to pick up in the draft. And he's basically in a spot here where when he untaps, he's even got Cry Shield to make it even tougher to attack through, such that it could reasonably block a Shivan Dragon.
Yeah, this Wall of Swords is completely brickwalling. Does Jason Chan have something like an Oubliette? That would be fantastic.
I mean, he's got Unholy Strength and Berserk, so he can potentially set up one gigantic attack, but that doesn't feel like a winning proposition here.
Right.
So Unholy Strength on Fire Sprites.
Oh, look at this. This is an aggressive play. Jason Chan opting to go for the potential 3-for-1 to get that Wall of Swords off the board so that he can get Hypnotic Spectre to start attacking unhindered.
I mean, Hypnotic Spectre hitting your opponent is a gigantic deal. Your opponent, every time they take damage, ends up having to discard a card at random. But here we see Dave Williams, you know,
he takes it.
He's no slouch at poker. He's good at reading his opponents. And you know what? He looked at this and said, this attack, there has to be something.
Right.
He didn't necessarily figure out exactly what that something was, but he knew he wanted to be able to be safe from that attack. He let it go. He casts a Wall of Heat on his turn, and he's got the mana up for Cry Shield, meaning that he's so much safer from attacks this turn than he was previously. He's got a 2/6 on the ground. He's got a 3/5 in the air. Either one of them could get so much more toughness. And now Jason Chan, he's getting an interesting spot because whatever he was threatening last turn might not be good enough now.
Guess what he drew this turn? A Shivan Dragon.
Oh
and he has a mountain. And he has the Fire Sprite in play. So all he needs to do is draw land number 6 to cast Shivan Dragon.
So Personal Incarnation has come down here for David Williams, and that is a very powerful card. It's intensive on the white mana, but this 6/6 creature, it's very difficult to kill because you can redirect damage that would be dealt to Personal Incarnation to Dave Williams. Dave Williams can choose to take the damage in the Personal Incarnation's place. If the Incarnation does die, he's going to lose a lot of life.
Right.
But at the same time, having a 6/6 on the board may well just be good enough for a lot of the time. Okay, so Zombie Master comes down from Jason Chan. That one, it's just a 2/3. Yes, it gives other zombies Regenerate and Swamp Walk, but right now, none too exciting.
No zombies on the battlefield. Now, keep in mind, remember, David Williams still has that Fireball in his hand. He can use it to get some of those flyers off the board. Oh, look at this!
Okay, so he's cast Berserk on his opponent's Personal Incarnation. So that means that right now, David Williams has a 12/6 trampling creature, but he's going to have to sacrifice it at the end of combat, and he's going to lose
Look
half
at that
his life.
removal spell. G to take 12 and then at some point get that Personal Incarnation off the board?
I mean, when the Personal Incarnation dies, Dave Williams will be taking 8 damage himself. This is an interesting little situation we find ourselves in here.
At the beginning of the next end step, destroy that creature if it attacked this turn. But Jason Chan just took a giant chunk of damage. And keep in mind, David Williams is holding a Fireball. So now David Williams is just 3 mana away from just casting a Fireball to kill Jason.
I mean, 2 mana away. He's got a mountain in hand.
Oh, right. Okay, so you just need 2 lands.
So the player's just checking the Oracle text on some cards here. That's something that we're likely to see the whole way through this Silver Showcase. There are a whole bunch of cards whose text has changed slightly in various ways over the years, just to clean up the templating. So, for example, the Zombie Master that's on the battlefield, when it was printed in Alpha, it was Summon Lord. Mm-hmm. It is now a zombie. It doesn't convey all the bonuses on itself.
Right, okay.
So Chan here, Urg Raiders and Shivan Dragon in hand. He's cast his Berserk, and it seems like a fairly good Berserk here. Chan on 8 life.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't going to be able to deal with that Personal Incarnation otherwise unless he drew the Oubliette.
Yeah, this is a very interesting situation we find ourselves in all of a sudden. Berserk, this kind of the lesser-known mode of it, often it would be the thing that you use to finish off your opponent.
Right. And now David thinking to himself, okay, I'm going to take a bunch of damage off this personal incarnation. Do I use this fireball to get the 2 creatures that Jason has on the battlefield? Because David Williams does have the ability to split up that fireball and deal 2 damage to both the Fire Sprite and the Hypnotic Spectre. By doing that as well, if Jason Chan potentially has a card like Shivan Dragon in hand, he also needs to play exactly Mountain to be able to play that Shivan Dragon, as he's starving Jason of that second red source.
It's a very important point, Paul, and it looks like that's exactly what David's going to do. Killing off Hypnotic Spectre, just something that's a good value play. Killing off Fire Sprites may mean that he doesn't have to play against the biggest bomb in his opponent's deck. I like that fireball.
Yeah. So now go with the 3-for-1. But now David Williams doesn't have a way to attack here. So Jason Chen does have plenty of time. Both players now at 8 life. David Williams has lots of defenses set up, but if Jason can find that red source for that Shivan Dragon, David Williams is in a lot of trouble.
Well, you know what Jason Chan just picked up? Howl from Beyond. This, with Berserk, could have just been a wombo combo to completely kill the game. As things stand, the Berserk's already gone. That's not something to worry about anymore. But Howl from Beyond, instant speed, pumping a creature's power by as much mana as you have available, that's a way of essentially fireballing your opponent's head if you can attack unblocked. Unfortunately for Jason, attacking unblocked when there's 2 big walls on the other side of the battlefield, going to be very tough.
Yeah, it's going to take some time. Jason's going to need to basically go wide, have more creatures than David Williams, and then once one of the creatures gets to go through, then he can use that Howl from Beyond for lethal.
So this is a suspicious attack. It may be that this is Jason saying, I just need to get one of your big walls off the battlefield while you only have 1 mana up. You can't use your Cry Shield.
Right.
But if you're Dave, I don't know if you can afford to not block with one of them, because otherwise you're just taking so much damage here.
I think Jason Chan is happy using the Howl from Beyond here just to get one of those walls off the battlefield potentially. Okay, never mind. It was kind of like a free attack, as David Williams just has two walls in play.
Yeah, the Zombie Master wasn't going to get killed by the Wall of Heat. I guess that he was maybe hoping that it was going to be the Wall of Swords that blocked there. Amulet of Krug the play here for David Williams, so that a way of preventing damage. You can tap it to prevent 2 damage, and that's still more ways that Dave Williams is able to reinforce his defenses, but they're not going to help him win the game. He needs to find a way of closing things out.
This really just comes down to the top decks, and Amaz has that Shivan Dragon in hand, so he just needs to find a mountain, but he keeps drawing the forests. We did talk about earlier that this was a bit of an ambitious splash, as he does not have a ton of red sources, and one of the red sources that he heavily leaned on was the Fire Sprites, which is now in the graveyard.
Slight correction for you. Amulet of Krug only providing
here.
1. JMD Tome. So this is a card that caused a lot of conversation for people watching the draft. Jason Chan got this comparatively late.
This is going to break the stalemate.
Now Jason Chan is going to be able to draw 2 cards a turn. This could be huge, but a big draw from Williams as well. Circle of Protection green means that a lot of the creatures in Jason Chan's deck, for just 1 mana, David Williams can prevent all of the damage from them.
Yeah, but this JMD Tome can just get out of hand, and Jason Chan still has the Shivan Dragon. He's got Fireball in his deck. He's got a lot of cards that aren't green that can also end the game. David Williams needs to find a threat here fairly soon, or this JMD Tome will run away with the game.
So Jason here, it costs him a princely sum of 4 mana, but he gets to draw additional cards, and drawing cards is one of the most powerful things you can do in Magic. There he drew a Lure. Now, you stick Lure on one of your creatures, every creature then has to block it if it attacks. Why is that good, Paul, on this board?
Well, David Williams has 2 gigantic walls on the battlefield, and now he can set up a situation where if he has multiple creatures on the battlefield, he can put Lure on one of his creatures, then with the other creature that gets through, he can use Howl for Beyond for lethal damage.
All right, so there is a path to victory for Chan, who is gradually amassing creatures in hand. So at some point, he could get that overlap. And for Jason Chan here, there is a way of winning the game immediately. For David Williams, right now, he's got to find something. And at the moment, all he's finding really is land here. The enchantments in his hand, the Holy Strength, the Holy Armor, they don't really change anything for him.
Yeah, Dave. Oh, and there's the mountain! That's a second mountain for the Shivan Dragon in Jason Chan's hand. He's going to slam the Shivan Dragon. There we go. This is why you draft it. Boom. Games go long. Games are grindy. Jason Chan with the giant threat on the battlefield here. He's got that Lure 2 in his hand.
The funny thing is here that the Shivan Dragon on its own wouldn't really be good enough because there's so much protection that David Williams has. It's the fact that there's also a way of forcing it through with that Lure that means that David Williams is in a really rough spot here. He's going to have to string something together. I'm not even quite sure what he's got at this point that's going to be able to get him out of this situation.
So now if Jason Chan chooses to put Lure on, let's say, the Erg Raiders, attacks with everything, uses a Howl from Beyond, that's just lethal damage.
All right, so what do we have? We have another creature for David Williams here. In principle, he's got more blockers, which seems like it should be good enough. In practice, though, I don't believe that that's going to be the case here.
Look, Shivan Dragon might just win both games for Jason Chan here.
Jason Chan rewarded for his first pick in the very last pack of this Rochester draft. Go back and watch it if you get a chance. There's a reason that this was one of the most desirable cards back when the set first came out.
Yeah, and we were even talking about what card do you really want to open the most if you want to win the whole thing? And I think many of us decided that it was Shivan Dragon.
Yeah, it's a creature that's big enough, that's difficult to kill with a lot of removal, and it will end games very fast.
And it attacks through all of the reach creatures, all of the other flying creatures. It is just kind of the biggest, baddest creature, you know, that you can have in this format.
And that artwork as well, the original Shivan Dragon artwork by Melissa Benson, just spectacular. You can see the dragon just looking down on all of its foes and saying, I got this.
Right. So yeah, so if Jason Chan chooses to put the lure on one of the smaller creatures, he's guaranteed to get it for 7 points of damage. If he uses a Howl from Beyond, that's 4 additional points of damage, which will be a total of 11 points of damage. And David Williams can only use the Amulet of Krook to prevent 1 damage to himself. So this is lethal. And I think David Williams is kind of revealing his hand. He has no more cards in hand if he plays this Holy Strength.
Yeah,
so I think Amaz just has this.
Williams calculating everything he can. He's been studying how things went in the draft, how things went with his deck building.
He sees it. This is lethal. This is lethal. Lure. Erg Raiders. Attack with everything. He doesn't even need Howl from Beyond. And that's it. Jason Chan wins. Beats David Williams' awesome red-white deck.
Fantastic stuff. Jason Chan there, little smile on his face. He was able to string things together there. There were a lot of people going into this draft feeling like he had to see the run of the draw to be able to cast Shivan Dragon. But one of the things that I think that many people maybe weren't focusing on quite so much, games go long in this format. You have a little bit more time to draw your mana, and ultimately, that's kind of how it played out. Jason Chan able to cast Shivan Dragon, and both games that he got it into play, proving absolutely decisive and advancing him to the semifinals.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think also I think after he submitted his list, people kind of talked to him and was like, hey, look, all you need to do is side out some lands, put in some mountains, because if you cast Shivan Dragon, you're likely to win the game. And that's exactly what happened in those games 2 and 3.
It was a 1-2 punch that ultimately was enough to make it into the semifinals. Congratulations to Jason Chan. And of course to Paulo, Vitor, Damo, Rosa in 2 games straight, taking down Brian Kibler. We will have more from the Silver Showcase after these messages.
It is an exotic orchard. My first memory playing professional Magic was against Luis Scott Vargas in a feature match area. I didn't even get to sit in the normal seating at a Pro Tour. I had to be under the heat immediately. And I was so nervous that when I was shuffling my deck, I just came down on it real hard and just cracked a corner of a card, just bent it, and I couldn't use it anymore. And luckily, BDM had a copy in his pocket. He just keeps his draft rares right here. He's just like, I've got it. I've got these 3 bad cards that I drafted. But one of them was Exotic Orchard, and we traded. And then he kept that until almost I was off. I was like still playing professional Magic 8 years later, and he had it, and he said, hey, look, I have this thing. And I'm like, you know, BDM, I'd really like that. It's special to me now. It's like, who has a memory of their first match on the Pro Tour? And he's like, well, if you top 8 another Pro Tour. And I'm like, that's funny. I don't think that's going to happen again. Like, I had a good run. Yep. And he's like, well, you're not getting back until then. I'm like, stop joking. Like, we both know that I'm over the hill. Yeah. And I finally got the top 8. And the first thing is he walks up to me and he's like, Did you win your wedding in? And I was like, give me my exotic orchard.
Still framed in your house right now?
Yeah, it's on my mantle.
Yep.
Hello and welcome back to the news desk here for the Silver Showcase. Marie Bertholdi, Rich Hagan, Simon Gertzen, and BDM is on the floor with one of our victorious quarterfinalists.
Thanks, Maria. I'm here with Jason Chan. Jason, that was super cool to see you using Berserk like that. How much experience do you have with these cards? I know you play a ton of Limited, but you didn't start playing until, what, like the 2010s?
Yeah, I was starting for Origins, but I have zero experience playing with these cards. I had to do a lot of homework before coming in, like lots of visual spoilers, lots of generator. I can't really like open packs of this because apparently these are pretty rare. So yeah, but you know, I played Magic before, so applying some limited skills here helped a little bit, I guess.
That Berserk play seemed like actually one of the key plays in the tournament. You drew the Howl from Beyond right after that, so it was a little heartbreaking. At what point did you think you were going to win this game?
Never until I killed the 6/6, because that 6/6 is it's crazy, right? And then I knew that if David didn't draw any more threats like a Sarah Angel or like another flyer, then I'll be, like I have time, right? So we were both top decking in a while, and I got to tell him, I was like, yeah, this is gonna be great. And then, yeah, I just got the Shivan, so then it was just GG from there.
All right, GG from there. Jason Chan, he'll be advancing to our semifinals tomorrow with his, well, beta Jun deck, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look forward to it.
Indeed, great stuff. Congratulations to Jason Chan. His opponent will be Paulo, Damo, Rosa. We can confirm that by looking at the bracket. They sit Chan over Williams and PVDDR over Brian Kibler. That was an all-Magic Hall of Fame clash. We've got more on the way because the bottom half of the bracket is up next as our $1 Million Magic Weekend continues. Finkel against Levy, Cifka against Nakamura. Let's get into it. So, Maria, who are we opening up with here in quarterfinal 3?
Well, none other than the GOAT, John Finkel, will be the person we open up on. 16 Pro Tour top 8s, 3 Pro Tour wins, 10 Grand Prix top 8s, 3 Grand Prix wins. But, of course, we've got to add Silver Showcase champion to that line yet. 40 years old, founding member of Gamers Helping Gamers, a great organization that awards scholarships to students who play Magic. But let's take a look at what Johnny Magic has put together for us tonight. There's a look at what his deck looks like in visual form. How about the list version? So black, red. Simon, how do you like Finkel's deck here? He's, by the way, playing 41 cards, because sometimes you just can't cut the last one.
I liked it when he was drafting. I thought he did a really good job drafting a red-green deck. And now you see 9 swamps.
Okay.
But look at this, valuing power over quantity, basically. Torwalkie, Demonic Hordes, Drain Life, Terror, Pestilence. That's 5 black cards, and he ditched all of his green cards, all of his Curd Apes, to play these powerful uncommons and rares.
Now, is he doing that because he believes he's in a single match tournament where today's quarterfinal is incredibly important because obviously it's single elimination? Or is that a more general, if I want to win the whole thing and I'm going to play somewhere between 6 and 9 games with this deck over the next 3 days, I really want every powerful card I can find?
Rich, we both know John very well. He's not going for the quarterfinal win. He's going, he's going for the 3-0. This is just the most power he can pack into 41 cards.
I mean, if you just ignore that left-hand column completely, just wipe it all aside, and then just go down Chain Lightning, Disintegrate, Drain Life, Pyrotechnics, Terror, Orcish Rifle, and Pestilence. That's a crazy column of goodness.
Yeah, it's really scary. It's going to be scary for Levy. John is not even playing his first pick, Gauntlet of Might. Maybe because Raph also is playing Mountains, so he doesn't want to have that symmetric effect.
Okay, who's next, Maria? The opponent.
All right, the opponent is Rafael Levy. Pro Tour top 8s, 22 Grand Prix top 8s, and 6 Grand Prix wins. Brown belt and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, of course. Just take a look at him. All right, let's take a look at his deck. Here we go. We've got 3 colors here.
Right, so that gives you a graphic representation. But before we talk more about the deck, why don't we hear from the Magic Hall of Famer from France?
I'm here with Pro Tour Hall of Famer Rafael Levy, who is the all-time pro points leader from Europe, which is how he qualified for this event. Raf, you've played in a million tournaments. Maybe not quite, but close.
900,000, yeah.
Are you, is this just another tournament for you?
It's a little different. It's only 8 players, so it's going to be a little shorter, but the excitement is there, I can tell you.
Now, what does that mean for you? Because, you know, you go to these events all the time and, you know, it becomes a little bit like a job, but what is so exciting for you about this event?
Compared to the other tournaments, I'm super excited. I had, before coming here, had a little butterflies, like even more than usual. So it feels like I'm going to have fun and I'm going to like it.
What's the oldest pack you've ever opened before this weekend?
The oldest pack, I think, was probably Unlimited. Probably Unlimited.
All right, we're gonna get older than that this weekend. So beta packs in the offing here for Rafael Levy.
Let's take a look at what Rafael Levy's deck list is for this tournament. All right, Simon, taking a look here. We said we like John Finkel's deck. It's got a lot of powerful spells. What do you make of Raph?
I'm a bit more skeptical about that one. 3 colors is the first thing I don't really like. Sure, there is a Birds of Paradise, but still, that Hurricane is not going to have any flyers to kill against John. Balance is a very symmetrical effect. I think John has the upper hand here.
All right, let's get into quarterfinal 4, and we open up with Stanislav Cifka of the Czech Republic. He put all his eggs into one basket when winning Pro Tour Return to Ravnica. Of course, he did global ranked #1 player in Hearthstone in December 2017. That is his game of choice. Right now, he's back with his Magic Roots. Great to have him here. Let's take a look at his deck in graphical form for you. He's straight, black-red, lots of Rook Eggs, Pyrotechnics, Fireball. We'll talk more about the deck in a moment, but first, let's hear from Stanislav Cifka.
I'm here with Pro Tour Return to Ravnica champion Stanislav Cifka, returning to the Pro Tour here for the Silver Showcase. Stan, I understand you went to great lengths to prepare for this tournament. Tell us what you did.
The format is so unique, and I actually had no idea how to prepare at first, so I even had to spend a lot of time to realize what should I do, because it was so unique. And how it ended is that I printed the cards to prepare, because now it's not that easy to get a beta boosters anymore. And so I printed the cards, and then we simulated the beta drafts and obviously the other sets as well. So I hope it will pay off. Like, I don't know. Like the competition is tough.
How many drafts would you say you got to do going into this table?
With the other pro players, we made 3 drafts, so it's not much, but just the draft is very time-consuming, and we also discussed like what everyone would pick there. So I felt we were improved during these drafts.
Do you feel like from draft 1 to draft 3, you could see a real strategic improvement for yourself?
Yes, and like it's actually even the draft process took us like half of a day. So like maybe if I say like, yeah, we played 3 drafts, but every draft is like the whole day work. So it's actually not that few.
All right, Stan. Well, good luck. I hope to see how this playtesting pays off in practice here at the Pro Tour.
All right, let's see if that practice does pay off by taking a look at what he's put together for his deck before he plays it out in the feature match area. So yeah, we've got a couple of Rook Eggs, which, that seems pretty good. We've got Removal and Pyrotechnics, and Terror is a fabulous removal spell.
Another black-red deck that I really like, Maria. And count the number of X spells, please. Detonate, Disintegrate, Fireball, and Mind Twist. I wouldn't want to play against that deck.
And also a sort of virtual X spell in something like Pestilence, which again is sort of a way to sink your mana into it if you want to clear the board.
Absolutely. I think this deck is just really, really powerful. You want the game to go longer, but your creatures are cheap enough so that you can also apply pressure. I know that Stanislav Cifka in particular is a very methodical player that values preparation. I know he prepared for this event, trying some drafts, and this looks like a really good draft deck for the format.
There is just one question I have over this one, which is only 10 creatures. Now, we've seen in some of the beta drafts around Las Vegas and at Chiba that creatures are really at a premium. But here, as we've looked at these other lists, 14, 15, 16 creatures, you don't have to kill an awful lot of Cifka's creatures for him not to have any left.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And maybe that sinkhole could be another creature, because destroying lands maybe not the best strategy in this format. However, if you play smartly, if you don't expose your creatures when it's not absolutely necessary, and with the amount of information you have in Rochester Draft, I can totally see this deck winning.
Who is his opponent, Maria?
None other than Shuhei Nakamura. 6 Pro Tour top 8s, 29 Grand Prix top 8s, 7 Grand Prix wins, tied for the lifetime record there. Inducted into the Pro Tour Hall of Fame in the class of 2011. Let's take a look at what Shuhei put together. And well, we got a little Esper going on here. Simon, let's take a look at his deck list. And it seems that he's kind of got a little bit of a control angle going on here.
It looks like he had a plan going in, right? Valuing counter magic really highly. Power Sink, Counter Spell, Mana Drain, 2 blue Elemental Blasts in the main deck. I believe Cifka has the red Elemental Blast, so they kind of cancel each other out there. It's funny.
You did that on purpose, didn't you? Cancel each other out. That's very good. Very good. Oh, dear. So how do you see this one going? We've got Cifka with all those powerful black-red and maybe not as many creatures as we might want. Shuhei with sort of blue-black control, or Esper control.
I don't think that Shuhei has enough counter magic to stop all the powerful X-Spells and Pestilence from taking over the game. So I think that Stanislav Cifka is favored in this matchup.
Air Elemental, though, that's a pretty good creature. It's been a good creature back in the history of Magic. Still a good creature today.
Dice to Terror.
Wow.
Is that the old Dice
You're
to Doom
that
blade?
guy? Really? Simon.
I don't own the account, but
I'm very, very disappointed in you. Also, to be fair, we've already seen 4/4 flyers win. Admittedly, they could get a little bit bigger in the case of Shivan Dragon, but certainly can't argue with that. Air Elemental. One of the most reprinted cards in the history of the game. I think Giant Spider just about beats it. So why don't we take a look at the bracket one more time to show you where we are here in the Silver Showcase. Our players just finalising their decks. Jason Chan already through to play Paulo, Vitor, Damo, Rosa from our first set of quarterfinals. So now, will it be Finkel or Levy? Will it be Cifka or Nakamura? Here come the second set of quarterfinals from the Silver Showcase.
Hello and welcome back to our Silver Showcase quarterfinals. I'm Tim Willoughby, this is Paul Cheon, and we're going to get a chance to see one of the greatest Magic players of all time, arguably the greatest Magic player of all time, John Finkel, up against another Hall of Famer, Rafael Levy. Then we have Hall of Famer Shuhei Nakamura against Protour winner, chess master Stanislav Cifka. So much talent in our feature match area. And with cards from 25 years ago, I'm very excited to see how this one plays out. Let's head back down to our feature match area for our second set of quarterfinals. Our silver showcase continues in the quarterfinals here, and we're going to get a chance to see the greatest of all time, Johnny Magic, John Finkel. He's finding himself up against Rafael Levy here in this unique form of a draft. We have Beta, we have Arabian Nights, we have Legends, we have Antiquities, some of the oldest sets in the game, and turn one, the Birds of Paradise. This is exactly what Rafael Levy needs. His deck has an ambitious 3-color mana base, and that Birds of Paradise taps for all 3 of those colors. Yeah. Let's see what he can string together here to potentially get the early jump on this game.
Yeah, and this is kind of one of the starts that Rafael Levy needs to actually be able to compete with just the raw power level of John Finkel's deck. John Finkel has a really nice, streamlined red-black deck, tons of removal. He's got Disintegrate, he's got Pestilence, he's got Top End and Demonic Chords, Tarwaki, and Mishra's War Machine. I mean, he's even got Cheap Removal and Chain Lightning. He's kind of got it all. So Rafael Levy needs that turn one Birds of Paradise to get in for, you know, to like really work overtime here.
So a turn to Yoti and Soldier here. It's a 1/4 with Vigilance. It gets to attack in, and for Finkel on the other side of things here, Wall of Dust, I mean, it can block, but it really doesn't block very well on this particular board.
Yeah.
And look at all that follow-up. Shannon Dryads, a 1/1 with Forest Walk. No forests on this side, but just getting creatures on the battlefield, none too shabby.
Right, but this is just an army of 1-power creatures. I mean, Shadow Dryads is a 1-mana 1/1 Forest Walker. And this just tells me that Rafael Levy just didn't have enough playables to put into his deck, because round 1, he's playing against a black-red deck.
Yeah, there are other matchups where that Forest Walk can be huge, but not quite here. Meanwhile, Davenant Archer, that one a little bit more interesting. It has the ability to shoot attacking or blocking creatures, or in this case, just get stuck in the red zone, while Rafael Levy has the run of things in the early stages of this game.
Yeah.
So a white mana battery, that will be a way that Raph Levy can gradually store up white mana. He can pay 2 and tap it to put a charge counter on it, and then tap and remove some charge counters to generate white mana. It's a long game card, but these games go long. We've seen it already, Paul, and we're going to see it again in this round. Meanwhile, John Finkel, he's kind of sitting on his heels a little bit here. Aside from that wall that he's got in play on the second turn of the game, he's just hanging out, waiting to see what happens.
But look at his hand. Wow, it is completely loaded. This Rugkeg is going to do a decent job of just putting additional blockers onto the battlefield, and Raph Levy doesn't want to get rid of it because, frankly, he just doesn't have a way to deal with a 4/4 flyer if it does die.
Yeah, Rugkeg, it's a 0/3 on the front end. It's not an exciting creature. It just sort of sits there, but if you break the egg, then a Ruck comes out, and a Ruck is a 4/4 red bird creature that can very quickly take over a game.
Yeah, now, so Raph Levy did have a quote-unquote good start in the sense that he put a bunch of permanents onto the battlefield, but it is a pretty anemic offensive squad. So he needed to really ramp into just kind of a large green creature, but he just hasn't found any of those.
So along comes our first legend from Legends of the entire series thus far, Tarwaki. So a 3/3 for 5 on its own. Doesn't look that exciting, but dealing 2 damage to attacking or blocking creatures, it just makes life very, very difficult for Rafael Levy if he ever wants to get into this red zone.
Yeah, that's a huge effect. And, you know, when you look at kind of cards in the old days, there's not as many of these utility creatures with activated abilities that kind of affect combat. So Tarwaki is going to just completely take over this game. And, you know, Raph Levy needs to draw a big creature quickly. But, you know, all of these cards are just kind of defensive cards. And if you talk about late game, I feel like John Finkel has the huge edge here, as he has cards like Disintegrate, Drain Life, and Pestilence.
Another card that's worth looking at here, he's not able to cast it yet, but at some point it may come down. Demonic Hordes, a gigantic creature that can also destroy lands, and that will be so painful for Rafael Levy's deck. He can tap it to destroy a land. Yes, he will have to play black, black, black to keep it in play each turn, but you know what? If John Finkel can shut down the lands of Raph Levy, then Raph doesn't have much else going.
Right, yeah. And Raph currently just has no way to actually attack here, so yeah, John Finkel looking very, very good here. There's a Keldon Warlord onto the battlefield, but keep in mind, it is not a 4/4, as one of the creatures that John has on the battlefield is a wall.
Yeah, it only counts non-wall creatures. There you can see the Keldon Warlord sat astride his horse with his little legs there. And it's one of those creatures that's only going to get scarier as the game goes on and the board fills up.
Right. And Rafael Levy, you know, he had a nice start, I guess, but got John Finkel down to 17. But John has now, you know, more than stabilized here. Rafael Levy does have the ability to continue to charge up his mana battery, and he does actually have an X spell. He has multiple X spells. He's got a Disintegrate and a Hurricane, which you can potentially use to kind of close out the game.
Yeah, it's interesting that John Finkel actually planned for what happens if a match goes super long. He's playing 41 cards here, which is a little bit unusual for Limited.
Yeah, so we were going through all the deck lists and, you know, just making sure everything was right. And, you know, John Finkel, one of the greatest Magic players of all time, submitted a 41-card deck. And we were like, something's wrong here. There's no way John submitted a 41-card deck. So I actually had to go up to him during one of the matches and be like, did you really submit a 41-card deck? And he was like, yeah. So just proof that this is a different format. You know, sometimes you play games where just everybody just kind of goes through all their resources, and decking does actually happen, and that has to be the reason why he opted to go for 41.
So here comes Dragon Engine and Juggernaut. They get to watch as Keldon Warlord hits the red zone. The Keldon Warlord now pumped all the way up to 5/5, and swinging in here is going to be a difficult one for Rafael Levy to profitably get in a fight with.
Yeah, not a lot of good blocks here, and on top of that, Rafael Levy's staring at a Torwaki, which makes combat even more difficult.
I mean, it may be that sort of, yeah, he just has to settle for taking a bit of damage or throwing a creature under the bus. That Shannon Dryads is not going to be doing very much attacking here.
Right.
But next turn, Juggernaut's also going to be attacking. It has to attack each and every turn, and it will be very happy to do so. And Juggernaut, since the beginning of the game, has been one of those creatures that just ends games.
Right.
It's not big, it's not clever, but it will certainly take those life points down very quickly indeed.
Yeah, so Rafael Levy did draw a pretty strong card here. He drew Lightning Bolt, which does allow him to answer one of the big 3 toughness creatures that John Finkel has on the battlefield. John Finkel has both Juggernaut and Torwaki in play.
I mean, even Dragon Engine, with the amount of mana he has going on, is a relatively good 3 toughness creature here.
Yeah. And now John Finkel drew a Drain Life, which isn't very effective when you don't have access to a lot of black mana. Currently, he can Drain Life for 1.
I mean, Birds of Paradise does have 1 toughness, and the mana base of Rafael Levy a little bit fiddly here. But
okay,
here's some big attacks.
So I imagine here, because of that Torwaki on the battlefield, I think there's a decent chance that Rafael Levy fires off a Lightning Bolt here on the Torwaki before blockers to try to get himself in a situation where he can block the Juggernaut and finish it off with the Diavinant Archer.
Lightning Bolt. We see it there from M11. It's been printed so many times, but it was first printed in Alpha and Beta, one of the Boon cycle. Deals 3 damage for 1 red mana. The rest of that cycle were either some of the most powerful cards ever printed or were Healing Salve. But Lightning Bolt, a very, very powerful card indeed, and one that Rafael Levy will be very happy to have in this situation.
It looks like he's also just lining up a double block here. If he chooses to just double block with the Giant Spider and the Yochin Soldier, no, we got a trip. Oh, wait. Okay, so given that he's lining up the blocks, that means this Lightning Bolt will not be cast until after blockers, meaning that the Torwaki can be used.
Yeah, comfortable situation for John Finkel, less so for Rafael Levy. I mean, there's even the potential for a tiny drain life after combat to finish something off here.
Yeah, so yeah, given this block, if Rafael Levy chooses to block with both the Yoshin Soldier and the Giant Spider, that's 8 toughness, right? The Juggernaut can deal 4 damage to one of the creatures to finish it off, 1 damage to the other. Torwaki can then deal 2 damage to the remaining creature, meaning that the last creature standing will have 3 damage on it, and then he can, again, like you mentioned, use that drain life to finish it off.
And gain a point of life in the process. He drains that life from that creature.
That's right.
Rafael Levy here. I mean, he's not just got to consider the Torwaki. Like, there's also the ability to pump the power of that Dragon Engine. There's also the fact that that Keldon Warlord is just huge. There's so many different factors he needs to take into account here. It's a really rough spot for the Frenchman.
Yeah, I like the idea of Giant Spider on the Juggernaut, because then you can use the Archer to finish off the Juggernaut, but it looks like he's going for the double block here with the Giant Spider and the Dryad. Oh, so maybe he's saying that this is before blockers? He was just kind of lining up the creatures, but maybe he hasn't blocked yet. So yeah, that's what it looks like here.
Yeah, he may very well, before he moved anything around, said,
right,
we're not at declare blockers yet.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Worth noting that there are various variations on the rules that have changed since the start of the game. The phases, not quite the same. There are various little rules. Mana burn, not a thing anymore. At this stage in the game, when it was first printed, tapped blockers dealt no damage, for example. We got rid of that one. It didn't really seem like it really added too much to the game. A little bit more streamlined now, and these players, of course, having played since the start, their communication absolutely exemplary.
Yeah, so that lightning bolt was a big draw here. So now if he lines up these blocks, John Finkel has the ability to pump Dragon Engine 3 times, making it a 4/3. So he won't be able to kill multiple creatures if one of the creatures is a soldier. Given this block, Rafael Levy will be able to deal with both of those big threats. He'll be able to deal with both Juggernaut and Dragon Engine. He can use the Trapper to finish off the Dragon Engine here as well, as it will take 2 damage.
Is that, sorry, the Diavenant Archer?
The Diavenant Archer, he can use the Diavenant Archer to ping the attacking Dragon Engine, and then he's got two power also that will deal damage to the Dragon Engine. The Dragon Engine is a 1/3. So lots of creatures entering the graveyard here, but that was a pretty good exchange for Rafael Levy.
Yeah, that Keldon Warlord not looking quite as impressive on this battlefield anymore, just a 2/2.
Yeah, that lightning bolt was really big.
Well, more land here for Rafael Levy. As and when he draws an X-Spell, thanks to that white mana battery, it's going to mean that he's going to be able to cast it for an awful lot. As things stand, John Finkel, though, if he draws another Swamp, still has the potential to get his big, scary, demonic hordes on the battlefield.
Yeah, John is in actually a very good spot here, where basically the only bad draw in his deck is a mountain. If he draws Swamps, he can play the demonic horde. If he draws any red or black spell, he can mostly cast them. And Swamps just allows him to play both, not only the demonic hordes, but also he's got a Drain Life in his hand.
There's a Terror was the pickup there for John Finkel. Being able to destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature, a gigantic draw to being in black, full stop. And it's one of the reasons that bigger black creatures in this draft format are so potent, because they dodge one of the main removal spells in this format.
Oh, so this is really interesting. Is John going to Terror his Ruck Egg?
I mean, there's a temptation. You end up getting to make a 4/4 flyer at instant speed. While Lulu Wolf comes down for Rafael Levy, that one, it's a 1/1 that gets to tap to give a creature +1/+1 at instant speed. But yeah, this Rock Egg, it's a pretty tempting target.
Keep in mind, John Finkel knows that Rafael Levy has a Disintegrate in his deck. So he might want to kind of put pressure on Rafael Levy here. And in fact, he does use the Terror on his own Rock Egg to make a 4/4 flyer.
Worth noting that token substantially newer than the Rock Egg itself. Token's not really a thing that got created until later in the game.
And I think he's going to Drain Life this Birds of Paradise for 1. Oh, no, he's getting the Wolf. Never mind.
Oh, yeah, you got to deal with that Wailulu Wolf. Otherwise, it'll cause all sorts of bother. And Iron Claw Orcs coming down. Iron Claw Orcs, one of the first cards that made red decks win.
Right.
And here we have some big attacks from John Finkel. Gets in the air with that Ruck. And I like where this is going for Finkel. There's still the potential, though, that Rafael Levy, if he draws into a Hurricane, he could deal with that 4/4 flyer.
Yeah, he is main decking a Hurricane, which is mostly not great against John Finkel's red-black deck, as he has basically only the singular Ruck Egg as a way to make a flyer. But it is a card that he does need to draw to find an answer for the egg.
Oh, poor Birds of Paradise relegated to blocking here. But with 11 life to work with, I can see why Rafael Levy going in that direction.
Yeah, so Rafael Levy lining up the double block here. He's going to use the Archer to ping the Keldon Warlord to deal the final point of damage, which would make it lethal. But now Rafael Levy has no board.
Yeah, a white mana battery with a lot of mana stored away, and then just lands to work with. Meanwhile, he's facing down a 2/2 creature and a 4/4 flyer. This is a rough spot for the Frenchman. He's going to have to draw well. What's he got?
He's got some lands.
Uh-oh. Forest and Mountain will not be good enough here.
So let's take a look here. This mana battery is going to go up to 7. He's got 2 lands in hand. So 4, 5, 8, 9 mana with the battery on 7. So he can't even draw a Disintegrate for lethal.
So John Finkel, he's already got a wall of earth in play. It looks like he's got a wall of dust that he's just drawn here. So another way of stopping attacks on the ground. But right now it's not really about the stopping of attacks. It's about the making of attacks. And that's something that John far better set up for than Rafael Levy here. He has lethal on the board. And you can see there, in spite of all this, he's the one that looks stressed here. He wants to make sure that he can finish this game off.
Right, and Raph Levy just drew another mana source in Wild Growth. So John Finkel basically has this game locked up.
And Raph Levy, he scoops his cards up, draws a few deeper, but ultimately those few deeper were not going to help him in that game. So John Finkel picking up the first game. We're going to get a chance to see some more of that. And of course, our back table right after these messages. Hello and welcome back to this, the second set of quarterfinals here in our Silver Showcase. After the first set of games, we have John Finkel already up a game. That much we know, but what we don't know is how things went in game one between Stanislav Cifka and Shuhei Nakamura. For that, we're going to have to go down to our feature match area and talk to none other than Marshall Sutcliffe.
Thank you, Tim. So game one was hilarious. Stanislav Cifka goes, turn one Vampire Bats. That thing did 19 damage over the course of the game. On the second to last turn, as it turned out, Shuhei Nakamura sprung his plan. It was unsummon your bats, then use Power Sync to counter it on the way back down. But Cifka had red Elemental Blast for the Power Sync, but Shuhei had blue Elemental Blast for that. So he did actually counter it, and it looked like Shuhei might stabilize. Instead, Stan just calmly untapped, played Pestilence, activated it once, and it gave him the game.
I mean, that's not normally the way that Pestilence works. You typically are using it to deal with creatures and I guess a few points here and there to your opponent, but I mean, if Vampire Bats have done most of the heavy lifting, then it doesn't really matter how you finish things off. Let's talk a little bit about the deck that Stanislav Cifka has going on here, because there's a lot of power there, Paul.
Yeah, this is likely one of the strongest decks that we have here. Stanislav Cifka, it just has a deck full of X spells. We have Mind Twist, Fireball, Disintegrate, Drain Life, which is kind of a pseudo X spell, and then he's even got a Detonate. So, you know, he's got a lot of mana sinks, and he has lots of removal. And, just taking a look at this matchup and looking at Shuhei's deck, I think it's going to be really difficult for Shuhei to actually be able to turn it around and win, because Stanislav Cifka has 2 copies of Red Elemental Blast in the main deck, and Shuhei's primary win condition is Air Elemental and Rasputin Dreamweaver, both which are juicy targets against that Red Elemental Blast.
It's worth noting, though, that Cifka, these Vampire Bats, they serve a really important role here, because Shuhei, while he doesn't have as much counter magic as he might want, he does have a lot of counter magic. However, the Vampire Bats, even on the draw, come down fast enough that there's no counter magic available to Shuhei to stop them. And once they're in play, they are fiddly for Shuhei's deck to deal with. Each turn they get to attack in. Stanislav gets to pump up to 2 black mana into them so they can attack for 2. And while it might not be pretty, it's certainly very, very effective against the sort of control deck that Nakamura is working with here.
Yeah, Shuhei actually just does not have a whole lot of ways to deal with the Vampire Bats. He's got a rocket launcher and a Swords to Plowshares as the primary ways to deal with it. He's got a Terror that he's splashing, but Vampire Bats, black creature.
Yeah, we saw an unsummon much earlier this game.
Oh my goodness, are we going to
time.
see the unsummon into counterspell your Vampire Bats?
It might be a mana drain on on Vampire Bats. Possibly the least exciting card to mana drain in the history of those 2 cards. Mana drain.
Mana drain on a Vampire Bats. Wow.
Okay, so here comes a Ruck Egg. That a slightly juicier target. There's a bunch of counter magic in hand for Shuhei, but he says, I don't care about a 0-3 until there's a way that it might actually get killed off. Keepers of the Faith coming down. A 2-3 for 3 mana for Shuhei Nakamura. He needs to be very careful about what he uses his counter magic on, and for now, he's got blue up, and since the beginning of the game, that has signaled I might have responses.
Yeah. I love the patience there shown by Shuhei, too, because the Ruck Egg just does absolutely nothing here. Shuhei's not really pressuring the life total. He pretty much drafted kind of a blue-white control deck, so he's more concerned about this evasive creature than the Vampire Bats. But Cifka with the Red Blast to counter the counter spell.
Vampire Bats successfully making it onto the battlefield a second time, and this is going to be problematic. While Nakamura has a lot of counter magic in hand, he wasn't able to stop the Red Elemental Blast from countering his counterspell, meaning that Vampire Bats is down, and now they are the single most difficult to stop threat on this battlefield, as bizarre as that sounds.
This is basically Legacy, to be fair. I mean, we just saw Red Blast deal with a counterspell, right? I mean, maybe Vampire Bats is slightly below the line, but we talked about how evasion is really strong. Vampire Bats might not be able to do 19 points of damage this game, but it's going to do a lot of work.
So you can see Ruck Egg there, reprinted in 9th edition as a rare. When it was in Arabian Nights, this was a common. And there were a few cards that at the onset of the game, people didn't quite understand how they worked, or they maybe weren't worded quite as clearly as cards today. And Ruck Egg was one of those ones that it said, when it goes to the graveyard, you get your 4/4 bird. And people thought, oh, what? So if I just discard it, I can get a 4/4 bird? And there was a brief while that Ruck Egg was one of the most potent cards in Magic the Gathering.
Right. Now, normally Ruck Egg would be very strong, but in this specific matchup, it doesn't look great. But
Pyrotechnics here coming from Cifka. So this is a burn spell that can get split.
Ooh, and a mana drain.
So the mana drain means that now in Shuhei Nakamura's next main phase, he's going to have 5 additional colorless mana to work with. Does he have anything to do with it, though? I guess we'll find out very shortly.
I don't think he has a lot. He gets to play a Yoshin Soldier for free, but that's basically it. But he does have a Samite Healer on the battlefield, so now Cifka can only get in for 1 point of damage a turn with the Vampire Bats. But to be fair, that might just be good enough if Shuhei doesn't draw a way to deal with these bats on the battlefield.
Yeah, so Stan does have a Detonate in hand, and there's now a target in that Yotian Soldier. But Shuhei Nakamura, he has counter magic for at least one of the red spells in Cifka's hand, but a Fireball as well in there means that Cifka is going to overload all of the amount of responses that Shuhei Nakamura can find.
I wonder if he's just going to go for this Detonate just as a burn spell. It's like, I don't really care about the 1/4 body on this soldier, but I just want to deal 3 points of damage to you to try to end the game with a Fireball in my hand, and that's exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, you can see the mirrored in version there, originally from Antiquities. And I think that in Nakamura's hand, it's a Wall of Water alongside the other card there, so he doesn't currently have access to counter magic. Shields down, and there's so many different ways that Stan Cifka can potentially get things going here. We saw the Detonate, and he still has access to Fireball.
These bats, though, so much damage.
Yeah, we can see Living Wall. That's a reasonable blocker for Nakamura. Wall of Water, he can cast it, but it means he's tapping low on blue.
Yeah, and Cifka just being very, very patient here. This is going to put Shuhei down to 6. He can just go for lethal here if he wants. At the same time, he does have multiple red elemental blasts. He's main decking 2 of them, and he has a 3rd copy in his sideboard. So he can play it very patiently here, put the pressure, force everything with the Vampire Bats. But Shuhei draws an answer here.
Osai Vultures is a 1/1 flyer for 2. It's got some extra text. We're not going to worry about that because I really don't think it's going to come up. The important thing is it can block a Vampire Bat. Very rare that I ever imagined that sentence would come up in my coverage career, but apparently that's the world I live in right now. And now Stan Cifka might be more tempted to split a fireball in various directions to kill the Osai Vultures and potentially clear a path for his Vampire Bats here.
Yeah, so Cifka has multiple ways to fight through counter magic. Again, he's got multiple copies of the Red Elemental Blast. On top of that, he can draw something like a Mind Twist to also force the action. But at the same time, he's also aware that Shuhei Nakamura has more than 2 counterspells in his deck. If he waits, for a long time, Shuhei could amass a handful of counter magic. So he's really thinking long and hard here about whether or not he wants to fire off that fireball. But it looks like he wants to just play it a little bit more patiently here. Shuhei has no pressure here.
And to be honest, you could almost say that of the entirety of Nakamura's deck. He has very few cards that are going to threaten that 20 points of life that Stanislav Cifka has going on.
But now Shuhei has found the counter magic here for the fireball. He's drawn a blue elemental blast for the fireball in Cifka's hand.
Yeah, this is going to be a very interesting way to get this through.
This is great, by the way. Just because this is Rochester Draft and both players just know what each other are playing, the fact that one of them is playing a 2 Red Blast main and the other one's playing 2 Blue Blast main, they're basically pre-boarded against each other.
So along comes Rasputin Dreamweaver for Shuhei Nakamura. This, an interesting creature, one that you maybe have played a little bit in Commander because he's involved in some pretty powerful combos there. 6 mana, 4/1, starts off with 7 Dream counters. You can remove those Dream counters to either generate 1 colorless mana or to prevent damage to Rasputin, and he gains 1 Dream counter back up to a maximum of 7 in each of your upkeeps.
The problem is that Rasputin is almost never going to be attacking, as Stanislav Cifka has 2 Ruck Eggs to block it, and he wants to block. He wants that 4/4 flyer to enter the battlefield, so Shuhei still needs to wait quite a long time to try to find a way to win this game.
Shuhei Nakamura, who said that if he did particularly well in this event, he was very tempted to bid on his own deck from it when these decks go up for auction. These decks will be being auctioned off for charity, the charity being Child's Play, so do be sure to check that out afterwards. There's some very desirable cards that were opened up in this draft, but for now, Stanislav Cifka, he's very much focused on the moment, and this might be the moment that he fires things off.
It looks like he's committing.
Fireball. He has a Red Elemental Blast. How much better is it going to get for him here to close this game?
Right. Yeah, and now, by the way, Shuhei Nakamura only has 2 mana up, so they have to be exactly 2 Blue Blasts for this to be lethal. So Stanislav Cifka is going to go for it. A Fireball for 7, and he has a Red Elemental Blast backup here.
This could be it. There's a blue elemental blast from Shuhei Nakamura. Here's a red elemental blast from Stanislav Cifka. And there's a handshake. Stanislav Cifka taking the victory over Shuhei Nakamura. And he will be advancing to our semifinals. We have 3 of our 4 semifinalists determined now, Paul. Just 1 to go. And it's either going to be the greatest of all time, John Finkel, or Hall of Famer from France, member of the French World Magic Cup winning team, Rafael Levy.
Yeah, and I mean, just going through all these lists, I mean, you can't deny just the pure power level of these black and red spells. You know, we talk about how a lot of the creatures are a little bit on the weaker end, right? People are just trying to fill in the holes. But when you look at the spells, just the red, I mean, Pestilence, Terror, Drain Life, Pyrotechnics, Disintegrate, Fireball. I mean, practice actually pays off here because, I was talking to Paulo Vitor, and when he practiced drafts, he's like, I think I really want to be red-black because that's where all the powerful spells are. I mean, he didn't end up in red-black, but he was aware that that's the color combination that you want it to be.
What? No, but there was a mountain sitting over there.
So, as it turns out, of the cards that you talked about, such a large proportion of them are commons in Alpha Beta.
Right.
When you have Pestilence at common, when you have Fireball at common, when you have Lightning Bolt and Terror and Drain Life at common, it doesn't matter if your creatures are only okay when you have some of the most powerful removal spells in the entire format available to you pretty freely.
Right.
Now, yes, almost every deck will splash a fireball if they can find it, but you know what? The decks that can consistently cast them every time are just going to always have a leg up. And we can see a Chain Lightning in hand there for John Finkel, alongside a good mix of land and spells. He's got Iron Claw Orcs for turn 2. This seems like a good hand for the greatest of all time.
Oh, and did Rafael Levy opt to draw here? That's what it looks like.
I mean, I guess with a mana base that's maybe a little shaky, you might want to, but he's...
Ooh, but there might be some punishment here. Turn 2 Iron Claw Orcs. Oh, but the answer in the turtle.
I think that there might have been a relatively substantial switch after sideboarding here, because
Wait,
game
what?
1,
I see
Rafael Levy
blue
was
mana.
white, red, green, and now he has a giant tortoise in play.
All right, so let's take a look at some of the blue cards that he has in his sideboard that he brought in. I see a giant turtle, an unsummon, a blue elemental blast, which is very good in this matchup, and a sea serpent, which is maybe a good blocker, but it doesn't actually get to attack.
Well, the interesting thing here, John Finkel, he may have assembled a different kind of combo. So he has a Wall of Dust, which is a creature with a good high amount of toughness, and he has a Pestilence in it.
Oh, wow, and this is going to be big.
So Iron Claw Orcs there, they're attacking in. They might as well. They weren't going to be doing any blocking.
And there it is. Considered to be the best limited common of all time, Pestilence is on the battlefield.
Yeah, the fact that this one common is just crazy. When it was color shifted or when it was reprinted in various sets, it got pushed up to uncommon. And being able to deal 1 damage to each creature and each player again and again and again makes it so difficult for other players to be able to get anything going.
Yeah, again, this is why you want to be red-black. There are commons in beta, in both red and black, that are just better than most rares you would take in modern draft.
Yeah, and this is one of the key reasons that if you jump into black early, before you've even seen a Pestilence, it means that if one happens to show up, you are in prime position to be able to use it. And that's the situation that John Finkel put himself in this draft. And lo and behold, he finds himself against Rafael Levy. And right now, based on what's on the battlefield, he's in great spot.
Yeah, I mean, that is the huge reason to kind of shut off black. Like you mentioned before, if you play red, people are still going to steal those pyrotechnics. They're still going to splash those fireballs away from you. But Pestilence is a heavy commitment. So if you lock in black early, you will get rewarded with a card this powerful.
Meanwhile, Rafael Levy, he's missing land drops. He had to discard those Desert Nomads, not able to get them into play. Desert Walk, not something that was likely to come up in this particular matchup anyway, but as things stand, I mean, here we see the reason that Iron Claw Orcs are good. We've got Desert Nomads on one side. There are 3 mana 2/2. Iron Claw Orcs, they cost a little bit less. Orcish Oriflamme now means that when they attack, they'll get +1 power. Iron Claw Orcs were a big part of the original Sly decks, the original Giba decks, as some people called them, that were just about having an aggressive curve, attacking in, and that was the beginning of red deck wins, Paul.
Right, and now another missed land drop out of Rafael Levy. He's going to have to discard. I mean, he was already in a lot of trouble with that Pestilence on the battlefield, but you know it's even worse if you can't play any of the spells. John Finkel here just slowly going to be whittling away. Actually, he hasn't activated the Pestilence yet, but he might here. And look at that hand.
Yeah, I mean...
Oh, 4 colors. Yes, 4 colors. There's a Spirit Link, Unsummon, Hurricane, and Disintegrate in Raph Levy's hand.
No black cards, but pretty much everything else. Unfortunately for him, though, while he could cast that Unsummon, there's really no reason to on this battlefield. I think the best that he could hope for is that he could use the Unsummon to make it so there are no creatures on the battlefield, potentially get rid of a Pestilence at some point.
Yeah, that's what he's really hoping for, but I just find it really hard to believe that John Finkel would put himself in that situation.
Yeah, this is... We see the activation of Pestilence there. That's just kind of a value thing. Each player taking 1 damage, but Finkel feeling like he's in such a commanding position that ultimately favors him if both players are on low life totals. I mean, he's got a Chain Lightning in hand for a kickoff.
Yeah. I did ask John how he felt about the first round matchup, and he was pretty confident because he was like, you know, it didn't look like Rafael Levy ended up with just enough powerful cards in his deck, and so he's like, you know, round 1 feels like something has to go terribly wrong for him to actually lose this matchup.
It's definitely a scary one when John Finkel is saying that he feels confident in a matchup.
Right.
I've faced that down. When you sit down against John and he says, yeah, I feel pretty good about my deck. That's not a nice feeling. Keldon Warlord here coming down for Finkel. That one, not too big just yet, but it's not going to take too much for the Warlord to grow. And here's the third land for Rafael Levy. Surely he can get something going here. I guess that he doesn't want to play Birds of Paradise because it's just going to die for free to this Pestilence.
He has a Disintegrate. There's a chance he uses this Disintegrate on the Keldon Warlord before it gets out of hand. He can use the Disintegrate on it for 2, as it's currently a 2/2 because the wall that's currently on the battlefield doesn't actually contribute to Keldon Warlord's power and toughness.
It seems like a reasonable play. Onulet might be the one that comes down, though. This one, kind of an anagram of... it was originally intended to be multiple Onulets on the card because it was intended to be an anagram of Soulnet, a creature that when it dies, you gain some life. As it stands, there's only one in the picture for Anson Maddox, so it's just the singleton 2/2 with its little bowl of water that it's drinking there. But it's a very efficient creature, a 3-mana 2/2 that when it dies, you gain some life. In the early stage of the game, you get a lot of value there.
Right.
Pyrotechnics for John Finkel now. His cup runneth over with ways of dealing with what Rafael Levy has going on. 4 damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures or players. That's something that he may well just want to sit on for now, but at some point, even if Rafael Levy finds a way of getting himself in a position of having a good creature or 2 on the battlefield, John Finkel, he can just, knock him back down.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where John Finkel just has a handful of great removal, but all of Raph's creatures are just pretty bad, so he doesn't actually want to use it. But he also wants to press his advantage because he's ahead on mana, and Raph Levy's been kind of a little mana screwed. So it's like an interesting situation here because he's like, do I really want to fire off my removal spells on your Onulet and Tortoise? At the same time, Raph Levy is discarded for 2 turns, so it's a tough spot.
Yeah, and the copy of Pestilence in play, he's not really been able to leverage too much because at the moment his creatures are the ones that can attack at least of a similar, if not smaller size than what Raph has going on the back end. So he's just doing the single points of Pestilence here and there.
Oh, and then I think he's probably just going to go... Oh, I see.
Pestilence on my turn, Pestilence on your turn.
Right.
That's how I can get these life totals down as fast as possible.
Okay, and Raph Levy does have some decent defensive creatures here. He's going to be able to play another 4 toughness creature here if he wants in the Yotian Soldier. That Bird of Paradise not going to enter battlefield anytime soon as long as that Pestilence is in play.
Yeah, and this is kind of virtual card advantage, right? That there's a card languishing in Raph Levy's hand doing absolutely nothing because there's an onboard easy answer for John Finkel that he's using every turn anyway.
Right. John just playing it very slow here, just Pestilence, 1 damage at a time. He's also holding 7 points of burn and Chain Lightning and Pyrotechnics, so maybe this is currently his main path to victory.
So a Dragon Engine, a nice pick up here, because that's a creature that might, in theory, start attacking at some point. Though, in practice, if I'm John Finkel, I think that just doing these little plinky points here and there, even though the life total's going down at a completely even rate, Finkel has so much burn in his hand that when he wants to change the sort of landscape of how these life totals look, he can do so very easily.
Yeah, what I imagine, John, the situation hasn't really changed here. So I imagine what he might be looking to do here is play a Dragon Engine and then do the same thing with Pestilence on his turn and the Pestilence on the following turn. Although he does have another creature that he's playing this turn, meaning that he can attack with a 3/3 Keldon Warlord, but maybe that's what he goes for. Maybe he plays the Dragon Engine, plays the Chain Lightning to get one of the creatures off the board. Then he has an attack with the Keldon Warlord, possibly.
So here comes a Chain Lightning. I mean, I guess you never know when your opponent's going to get 2 red mana to be able to throw Chain Lightning back at you. So
oh no, this makes sense. He has an Orcish Oriflame on the battlefield. Given that Keldon Warlord is a 4/3, meaning that Raph Levy doesn't actually have a good block here, as he has two 1-power creatures on the battlefield.
And 4 power, it will take down either creature that chooses to block it.
And I think Raph's just going to take it here. Not really in a position here to start throwing away your creatures.
Finkel, between the Dragon Engine and the Mishra's War Machine that he has in hand, he's accurately representing Mishra's side of the Brothers' War here.
And one thing is, there's really not a lot of mana sink creatures in the format, but John seems to have a good amount of them.
Yeah, I mean, John on 5 lands, he's sitting pretty. He's quite happy. Raph, though, with just 3 of the 4 colors that he needs and not nearly enough of them, is in a little bit of a rough spot here.
Yeah, so now he's been. There's a lot of pressure here with that Keldon Warlord. Maybe now is the time to fire off that Disintegrate to deal with either the Keldon Warlord or the Dragon Engine that's on the battlefield.
going to have to deal with something here.
Yeah, he's also got an unsummon, I suppose. Maybe he can try to make a big play here with an unsummon as a trick, which would then make the Keldon Warlord smaller.
Yeah, there's a few options available to Raph Levy here. I mean, I guess that 14 life, he's not dying immediately.
Right.
He might be dying sooner than he immediately thinks, but there's a little bit of time for the French Hall of Famer to play with here, and he's going to use it.
Yeah, and he really just wants to find that fifth land, given that he's got that Dirkwood Boars on the battlefield, which will, help stabilize. So yeah, Raph hoping to utilize this unsummon here to get that Keldon Warlord off the battlefield.
Battering Ram, the pickup for John Finkel. That kind of an interesting one. It's a 2 mana 1/1 with banding when it attacks, and it's also very good at destroying walls in a gigantic flavor win.
Yeah, very, very nice flavor.
I mean, in general, John Finkel's deck not very wall friendly because he also has Juggernaut that can't get blocked by walls.
Right.
Walls, a surprisingly common feature of the early game. That they're here. They're around a little bit, defenders these days, but not nearly to the same extent they were back in Alpha, Beta Unlimited, and indeed Legends.
Yeah, so just John playing another creature is huge because Raph can't use this unsummon to set anything up. He might have to just use the unsummon on the Keldon Warlord just to buy himself some time here. The Keldon Warlord is currently a 5/4 with the addition of that battering ram that was put onto the battlefield.
Yeah, in many respects, right now, the most important thing that Battering Ram did was pump Keldon Warlord.
Yep. And John does not have the mana here to actually replay it, so Raph did buy him himself a little bit of time, and then here's another big blocker.
In terms of the amount of toughness that has been put onto the battlefield by Raph Levy, he's doing very well indeed. Sadly, can't really say the same for power. He's not done a single point of damage to John Finkel so far in this match. John Finkel is at 15 this game, and all of that damage has come from his own Pestilence.
Right. And now John is not going to be able to use the Pestilence because he does not want to lose the battering ram that he just played that turn.
Dwarven Warriors the pickup. This another creature that he's not going to want to lose to Pestilence, but at the same time it allows him to attack unblocked with some creatures.
So now he can use the battering ram to band with the Ironclaw Orcs, meaning that if Raph Levy does set up some kind of block, John Finkel with the banding ability can choose to redirect all the damage onto the battering ram itself, meaning that the combined forces of that attack would be able to take down one of Raph Levy's creatures.
Yeah, because the Orcish Oriflamme will mean that each of these creatures, when it's attacking, is getting +1 power. So that band in total would end up with 2, 3, 4, 5 power in total.
And John is happy with just losing that battering ram, as he does have that Pestilence on the battlefield.
So we'd best cover off how banding works here, Paul, because it's a little unusual. On attacks, you can take any number of creatures with banding and up to one creature without banding, and basically create a super team that all attacks as if they're as if they're one creature.
Right.
So they're all attacking in one go. You only need one creature to be able to block that entire band. If you attack with the band, though, the benefit that you get is that when damage gets assigned in combat, rather than the person blocking being able to order blockers and deal damage just to whichever one creature they want, the person with the band just gets to split up that damage however they see fit, and they don't need to let any of their creatures die, potentially.
Yeah, and that is super, super powerful.
It's even more powerful, if you can believe it, on blocks, because you only need one creature with banding to form a band, and then however many multiple blockers you put in front of an attacker, you get to split the damage, and it's very, very tough to deal with.
Yeah, look at Raph Levy's board. What if he just had, an 0/4 creature with banding? He would just not be able to lose any of his creatures ever.
Yeah, there's definitely been people both in throwback drafts on Magic Online or maybe just picking up a whole bunch of old cards and putting together a weird cube who have been caught out by banding. A deceptively powerful ability, and also, it must be said, a fairly deceptive ability because the rules on it are a little bit complicated.
Right. It is very, very tricky. All right, so what is John Finkel going to choose to do here? If Raph Levy goes for the double block, John Finkel will lose a battering ram. He will deal 4 points of damage to likely the Yotian soldier, 1 damage to the tortoise.
I'll double block.
And then can't use Pestilence to finish things off. But I think he's just happy enough trading a Battering Ram for a 4 toughness creature.
I think that seems reasonable.
Yeah.
Worth noting that both these players have been playing for plenty long enough that they know just how banding works.
Absolutely.
Each of these guys, I mean, Finkel played in the juniors division of the very first Pro Tour. Rafael Levy, he played since the very early days of the Pro Tour, and both these guys were in the very first Hall of Fame class. Keldon Warlord coming back down here for John Finkel, and his board looking every bit as dominating as it has since the very early stages of this match.
Yeah, and currently a 3-3. But on attacks with the Orcish Oriflamme, it's a 4-3, and John Finkel is also holding a creature in hand. Now, Raph Levy still being very, very patient with that Disintegrate. He's got a couple of 5-drops in his hand, but can't play them. He's only got access to the 4 mana. Will he use the Disintegrate this turn to get that Keldon Warlord off the battlefield?
Yeah, I mean, the cards in hand that Raph Levy has, as soon as his mana gets higher and higher, do become pretty imposing. He's gone a lot of turns without drawing land, though, and that's really where a lot of his problems stem from. The Disintegrate in hand, yes, it's very powerful, but it's only dealing with one of the good cards that's on John Finkel's side of the battlefield, and that good card is not going to be Pestilence, and Pestilence is just something that ultimately makes so many of his other decisions very complicated.
Yeah, I don't think he has a choice now. He was pretty patient with it before, but I think he has to fire it off because now if he draws a land, he has 2 good plays. If he draws a forest, he can play that Moss Monster, which just blocks everything. And if he draws any other land, he can play the Dirkwood Boars as well.
So goes for the Dragon Engine here rather than the Keldon Warlord. That creature does get exiled rather than going to the graveyard. That's part of Disintegrate's special little text there. I guess it still shrinks the Warlord.
It does. It does. Now, Keldon Warlord currently sitting at 2-2. Does not have a great attack here. John Finkel needs to deploy a few more creatures before finding a profitable attack.
Ruck Egg qualifies.
Ooh.
And Ruck Egg might change the face of how aggressive Finkel wants to be with Pestilence. If you can get up to having 3 black mana, then using Pestilence to kill your own Ruck Egg. And we saw Stanislav Cifka quite keen to use an actual factual removal spell to kill his own Ruck Egg. And it may be that we're in a similar spot for Finkel where he's able to decide that it's just worth it to create a 4/4 flyer, deal a lot of damage to the battlefield, and just close things out in the air.
Right. And John Finkel is getting close to just being able to finish out this game with, just burn, right? He's got an active Pestilence. He's got that Pyrotechnics on the battlefield. He's, getting in for little points of damage here and there with all of his creatures.
So here comes Ironclaw Orcs. Its power gets pumped to 3 thanks to the Orcish Oriflamme, and that means that it's not going to take very much Pestilence for John Finkel to finish off whatever it is that chooses to block here.
Oh, okay, so 3 and 1. Okay, yeah. So now John Finkel. So if Raph Levy chooses to block with the spider, he can use a Pyrotechnics, or he can just use Pestilence to do cleanup here to finish off that 4 toughness creature. But if he did that, he would lose the Keldon Warlord, so he would want to play another creature post-combat to make sure that the Keldon Warlord would survive the Pestilence activation. Currently, the Ironclaw Orcs is a 3/2 because of the Orcish Oriflamme that's on the battlefield. Giant Spider being a 2/4. And Raph just hoping that John Finkel doesn't have a creature here, but of course he does in the Ruck Egg. And then here comes a Pestilence activation.
So that enough to deal with Giant Spider. John Finkel here, he's just gradually getting a sort of a death grip on everything that
Grinding
Raphael Levy
away.
has going on. It's not about closing this game out super fast, it's just about getting things going. And a Plains the pickup there for Raphael Levy. This unlocks a few different things. So he now has access to the mana to be able to cast Dirkwood Boars. He can also think about casting this Spirit Link. Now Spirit Link, on the face of things, it just looks like give one of your creatures lifelink. But actually, it's not quite the same, Paul.
Yeah. It actually triggers after damage is dealt. So if you take lethal damage, you will actually die before you gain the life.
The other thing that you can do is you can play it on your opponent's creature.
Right.
So if you put it on your opponent's creature, you still gain the life. So it kind of creates this weird situation where you've sort of dealt with one of your opponent's creatures unless that creature attacks you for lethal.
Yeah, so now that Raph has actually played his first I'm going to say, credible threat, his first big threat. John Finkel can now choose to use the pyrotechnics in his hand to get the Dirkwood Boars off the battlefield. And then he gets a... does he get a good attack if he does that, though? So he can attack with the Keldon Warlords, which would be sitting at 3-2. And then if he activates the Pestilence, his Keldon Warlord would die. So maybe that's not something that he's interested in doing.
I love how smug Dirkwood Boars look. I've always thought that the artwork on them, they just look so
They're
pleased
just so
to be in this game. 5 mana, 4/4 is
They're just well fed.
a big
Look at
deal.
them.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Rafael Levy does not look particularly smug about this situation. He knows the trouble that he's in here.
John Finkel continues to put pressure here, attacking with currently a 3-2 Keldon Warlord.
So this is another one of those situations where having Pestilence for the final point of damage means that any kind of blocks from Raph Levy that might look favorable look much, much less exciting.
So this is a situation where Raph Levy can choose to block with the Tortoise here, and then give Finkel the option of using a Pestilence trigger to potentially get the, trade the Tortoise for the Keldon Warlord. But I don't think John Finkel is interested in doing that. So
how about a Pyrotechnics to kill your Rock Egg and finish off the Giant Tortoise?
You know what? That one's a little bit better. That's a really good play.
We'll see what it is that Finkel goes for. As it turns out, he's happy to just let things stand for now.
Okay.
I guess that any time that you're using one of your removal spells on your own creatures, you are using up a card.
Right. That does feel pretty bad. Because this Ruck Egg is doing a good job of just keeping the Dirkwood Boars at bay. Like, Raph Levy just does not have a good attack here. Yeah, Raph's just like, this is a headache.
Yeah, Raph Levy, he wears his heart on his sleeve when he plays.
Right.
Like, it's not very often that he's doing the sort of appear weak when you're strong, appear strong when you're weak sort of thing.
Oh, the classic, the sigh go. Yeah.
As things stand, he's just got to figure out what he wants to do here to try and get back in things. Still hasn't found a double green at any point in this game.
Yeah.
Birds of Paradise just doesn't work for him.
Right. But to be fair, he is playing a 4-color deck, so sometimes you're just not going to draw your mana sources. This is kind of the other side. We saw Amaz in the previous match being able to draw one of his few mountains to cast Shivan Dragon, but sometimes you're just not going to draw the sources that you need.
He needs to channel some Chan and find the lands that he needs.
That's right.
The most ambitious mana base of any of the drafters in this top Silver Series match.
Oh, okay. So I see what Raph is trying to do. What he's trying to do is get John Finkel to block with the Ruck Egg so that he can play a Hurricane to get that Ruck Egg off the battlefield.
I like it. I feel like there's not very many ways that he's able to get ahead in this game.
But
this
John,
seems like one of them.
John has also got to be liking the situation, right? Because if Raph Levy does play a Hurricane for 4, that puts Raph Levy down to 7 life. John Finkel then has the ability to activate Pestilence twice to put Raph down to 5. Then he can untap, cast Pyrotechnics, and activate Pestilence one more time for exactly enough damage. And given that Raph Levy went with this line of attacking with the Dirkwood Boars, at this point I think he's just kind of committed to casting the Hurricane on Hurricane to deal with the egg. Oh, no. Never mind. It triggers at the end of turn.
So yeah, the timing on this doesn't work out too well. It's on Rock Egg, there are plenty of cards that it's just when this creature dies, get a whatever it might be.
I thought it acted like the Dragon Egg, which gives you the token immediately.
But yeah, when it comes to Rock Egg, there we can see it. It's at end of turn. That means that the sorcery speed Hurricane, not good enough.
Oh, and this is very, very close to game over here. What is Raph Levy down to here? He's down to 7. So now John Finkel has the ability to Pyrotechnics and Pestilence twice. Yeah, and Raph Levy doesn't have a lot of life gain. He does have that Spirit Link, which he probably has to put on his Dirkwood boards as well.
But here is Mishra's War Machine. So this is a 7 mana. It's a pretty big creature with banding, but it has a very, very high upkeep cost. Mishra's War Machine, every turn, in your upkeep, you have to discard a card from your hand, or the War Machine deals 3 damage to you and gets tapped. A 5/5 for 7 with banding is nothing to sneeze at, but you know what? The upkeep cost is very real. The good thing for Finkel, though, if he's looking for a way of just making sure he gets to next turn, the War Machine will do it.
Yeah, I think that attack with the Dirkwood Boars is just kind of going to seal Raph Levy's fate here. He's just took way too much damage on that exchange. It might have been better to just kind of be a little bit more patient, try to find a green source, play that Moss Monster. That's not to say that John Finkel was tremendously advantaged in this spot, because he did have that active Pestilence on board with an edge in life total, along with the Pyrotechnics in his hand.
Yeah, I struggle to see a way that Levy can get things going here. Let's have a look at what he's got going on in his hand. He's picked up a Flash Flood.
Got a Flash Flood. He can, this turn, choose to put a Spirit Link on his Dirkwood Boars to try to gain some life, but...
I mean, the Flash Flood becomes interesting because it lets you destroy, for example, a Ruck.
Yeah, yeah. It is a very, very effective sideboard card.
Probably one of the reasons even to consider being in blue after sideboarding.
Yeah. So what can he do here? He can put Spirit Link on a creature and also use Flash Flood to deal with the Ruck Egg. The Ruck Token.
I mean, technically it's just a bird.
All right.
We like
it's a big bird. 4/4 birds.
Oh, it's one of the biggest birds.
They don't make them like they used to.
Apparently not.
No.
I mean, you don't make them as you used to.
Oh, right. Right.
So here, Raph, he's just kind of figuring through what he needs to achieve here. I mean, step one, Finkel forgets his upkeep on his Mishra's War Machine.
Yeah.
That would be good.
That's likely.
Sometimes you got to play to your outs.
Whoa. Okay.
Untap. Oh, look.
Oh, he remembered.
Who'd have thunk it? So Finkel discards a card to his Mishra's War Machine so that it doesn't declare war on Finkel himself.
Yeah, and here comes a gigantic attack from John Finkel. Sending in everything. I imagine there's going to be some banding involved here.
I mean, not necessarily. It may just be that he wants to have overlap, so he's definitely get at least one creature through.
That's true. I mean, to be fair, he could potentially ban the ground creatures, but maybe it is better to just attack with everything individually, because he is so very close to ending the game here with the combination of Pyrotechnics and Pestilence.
So Flash Flood able to deal with the Ruck token. It destroys a red permanent. That's good enough there. Instant speed removal. We like a bit of that. And then there's going to be able to be a block on both of the ground creatures. So
this is a really good exchange, because this Dirkwood Boars is going to be able to eat that Keldon Warlord, which is currently a 3/2. But John Finkel does have access to that Pestilence, which he can use to deal the final point of damage to the Dirkwood Boars.
Yeah, I mean, this has been the story ever since turn 4, that every decision that Rafael Levy's making, even if it is the best case scenario for what he could do, is still not that good, because there's still a Pestilence in play,
Right.
and that Pestilence can still just make a mockery of every creature that Levy has access to.
Right, and now, I mean, John Finkel has all he needs to do is activate Pestilence twice, get Raph Levy down to 4 life, cast Pyrotechnics, and that will be the game. And the match.
John Finkel, the Hall of Famer, poised to make it through to the semifinals here of our Silver Showcase. These are the quarterfinals. The semifinals will be happening tomorrow, the same sort of time at the end of our regulation play at the Pro Tour. And then the finals themselves will be on Sunday morning, depending on, of course, your time zone. But before our main top 8 at the Pro Tour, we dearly hope that you're going to get a chance to see it. And, of course, we hope that maybe you will bid on these decks after these things. But
and he's just going for it main phase here. Pyrotechnics. Put you down to 2.
And it's only going to be 2 Pestilence activations to close this game out. Finkel passes it back.
Finkel being patient. So the reason why he went for a main phase here is because of a potential Blue Elemental Blast. And there you go. John Finkel taking it down with Pestilence.
2 games straight. John Finkel, our final quarterfinalist, making it through there. So much power in his deck, and the draws there from Rafael Levy in terms of lands didn't help him, but honestly, the draw that we had from the other side of things from Finkel was just so potent that I think that any of the players in this draft, in this Silver Showcase, they would have found themselves in a little bit of trouble there.
Yeah, and the thing is, Raph Levy had a board of just gigantic blockers. He had giant spikes. He had 3/4 toughness creatures on the battlefield, but it doesn't matter when you're facing an active Pestilence with the Orcish Oriflame. It made it so that all of John's smaller creatures were actually able to trade up and deal with those threats, and eventually he was able to just end the game as well. Pestilence acted as a removal spell and also a burn spell to win the match.
But that is the end of our Silver Showcase, at least for today. Do tune in for some more of that tomorrow. But for the closing out for today, let's head things back to the news desk.
Thanks very much to Tim Willoughby with the call there, closing out our Silver Showcase coverage for today. Rich Hagan joined by Maria Bartholdi and Pro Tour champion Simon Gertzen. What a day it's been. We promised you the best part of 12 hours. We're giving you even more than 12 hours. Here is the bracket. Let's show you what's going on in the feature match area here in the Silver Showcase. Earlier on, we saw Jason Chan Amaz take a 2-1 victory over Dave Williams of the United States. Paulo, Vitor, Damo, Rosa was 2-0 over Brian Kibler. The Dragon Master fell in the quarterfinals, and Paulo, Vitor, Damo, Rosa advances, a reversing of the 2012 Pro Tour Dark Ascension final. Then we got into the bottom half of the bracket. John Finkel 2-0 over Rafael Levy, we've just seen, and Stanislav Cifka 2-0 over Shuhei Nakamura. Now, iconic cards lend themselves to iconic moments, but they do have to line up, Simon. Is there a smugger feeling in Magic than the red player who knows they're going to win a counterspell war against the blue player?
I mean, these cards have been designed to match up against each other. Blue Elemental Blast, Red Elemental Blast. And Cifka knew what he was doing, of course, knowing that Shuhei was main decking the 2 blue Elemental Blasts, had the answer.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. So on the floor, we have winner of that quarterfinal. Let's hear from him now with Brian David Marshall.
Thanks, Rich. I'm here with John Finkel. John, I feel like you've been winning with cards like that since, I don't know, when you were coming to my events in 1995 and we would run sealed tournaments for Jazam Gens.
Yeah, I mean, I've probably played more of this format than probably any of the other people in the, in the top 8, so that was sort of nice. I remembered at least some of it from the old days, and it was, it was pretty nice to get to play some of those old cards, and the game just played very, very differently.
Now, I got to tell you, some of the people back at home, some of the old schoolers we might know, they were a little offended that you passed on J&D Tome in that draft. What was happening there?
So at that point in the draft, I thought that I was going to be a really aggro deck. I thought my was going to end up more of like a red-green base. Now, obviously, J&D Tome's really good, but I thought that the Juggernaut was going to be really good in the deck where I was going to have like the 2 card apes. But then it just sort of played out a little differently. Like I took a Pestilence over something that wasn't that great. I got that late Demonic Hordes. I'd taken that Terror when the guy already took the Fireball in the first pack. And we had enough playables. And I sort of had some ideas how the match was going to play out. And it seemed like, black was going to be the way to go. And if I had known that at the time when I took the Juggernaut, I definitely would have taken the J&D Tome. So the J&D Tome in this format is generally a much, much better card.
All right, so one match closer to the finals. How do you feel about your deck moving forward as you've looked at the rest of the field?
I feel pretty good about it. I think Dave had a really good deck, but he lost in his first round. I think Paulo's deck is probably really good. I think Stan won his match. He has a pretty good deck too. So I mean, everybody's some pretty good decks, but I don't think any of them can really deal with like a Demonic Hordes in play. And I think Pestilence is going to be pretty good overall. There could be some good matches because they have a lot of powerful cards in their decks as well.
All right, 2 more good matches, and well, that'll pay for 4 years of a scholarship for somebody through Gamers Helping Gamers. Good luck the rest of the way here, John Finkel.
Thanks so much, BDM. And of course, we have the semis coming up tomorrow after the Pro Tour. Paulo, Vitor, Damo, Rosa versus Amaz, Jason Chan. We'll see if he can get it done again with the Shivan Dragon. John Finkel versus Stanislav Cifka.
Right, $150,000 still to be awarded in the Silver Showcase, but our attention turns back to the Pro Tour at 9 a.m. tomorrow. We ramp it up once again as $1 Million Magic Weekend continues. Josh Utter-Layton, Ben Stark, Martin User, 3 Hall of Famers, perfection on day 1. Can anyone stop them on day 2? 12 hours and counting here on day 1. Let's do it all again tomorrow, but bigger and better. We'll see you then.